Oh howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Welcome to day 17 of teaser season for patch 3.24 and the upcoming Necropolis expansion. We're going to be doing this one a little bit differently to all of the other daily teasers so far. There's a good reason for that. That is because there is just so much to cover that's come out today. Almost every Scarab, or possibly every single Scarab that's going to be in the patch, has been revealed. And one of the things with Scarabs, because they're largely replacing the previous mechanics, which were Scarabs and Sextants both, they end up having a huge influence on the way that you will build your Atlas passive tree, and the way you build your Atlas passive tree will then have a huge influence on the way that you build your character as well. So, with all of that in mind though, I want to quickly go through the minor pieces of news today, get those out of the way as people are joining the stream. As always with streams on YouTube, if you're watching this after the fact, or if you fall a bit behind the stream, you can speed up the stream until you catch up. You can also rewind, jump around, anything except see what I'm going to say in the future. Additionally, I'll be trying to keep an eye on chat, but if it does end up being a bit out of control in terms of the number of people here, then I may end up missing some questions, but we'll try to catch things. Anyways, the first piece of news today is one of those pieces of information that comes out every league and that there's always one or two people that misunderstand. That is, they're saying private leagues for PathOfExile and Necropolis are now available. What this means is not, if you're paying for a private league, you can start playing the Necropolis expansion early. What this means instead is that if you are intending to league start with a private league, then all of the administrative back-end work that needs to be done in order to make that happen, you're able to start doing that now. So you can start inviting your friends, you can start inviting random people on the internet, and then once you've done that, you'll be able to start playing the league at the same time as everyone that plays in the main Necropolis leagues will be able to do so. So, that's all that this means. If you're running a private league, then this is a very important announcement. If you're not running a private league, you can completely skip this one. Next, there are no changes to the patch notes today. There were a number of them yesterday, but there have been none today. And so if you missed out on the changes to the patch notes that have been made in the last 2 days, I did cover them in the day 16 summary. I think I've put a link to that down in the description below. If I haven't, I'll try to remember to put it there afterwards. But if I do forget, because, you know, there's so much going on at the moment that I do forget things, then you'll be able to find it from my channel pretty easily. So, no new patch notes. The next thing that came up today was all of the 2020 gem stats. And whilst I'm not going to go through all of the details here, it's worth noting that Call to Arms is worse than people originally thought. Although it has no effect on cooldown at 2020, it has minimal effect on cooldown, 6% reduced cooldown recovery, and probably ends up being something that you can realistically get to 0%. It still is really bad because it seems like this can only trigger one gem now. So that's basically making Call to Arms in a really bad spot. Everything about Warcries is in a bad spot this league, and yeah, I don't like what they're doing there. Anyways, that's something that we discussed extensively in the day 9 video. So we'll skip through that one for a bit, and also we'll skip down automation except for the new news, which is basically exactly what people expected, that at 2020 it is indeed 0 modification to CDR. Now, Artillery Ballista of Cross-Strafe, this has been teased earlier, and really I'm not confident to say whether this is better or worse than the baseline Artillery Ballista gem in a bossing situation. I'm kind of inclined to think it might be really, really good, but it's one of those things you'd have to test out in practice to be sure. The good thing about this though is that it's going to scale off all the same things that Artillery Ballista does. So if you're playing Lightning Arrow, if you're playing Ice Shot, then maybe you want to consider this as your boss killing skill. And then if it turns out that you prefer the baseline version of Artillery Ballista, it's a very easy swap over. And same thing applies to Focus Fire. Again, going to really need to feel these gems out in practice. But the baseline Artillery Ballista, very, 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 very strong. People are saying in chat that Call to Arms in the original video that Grinding Gear Games put out teasing the league features, they did indeed show it triggering multiple Warcries, or at least it looked like it did. It does now look like that is not an option, because they always do change things a little bit between the original trailer recording period and the league going live. And it looks like that's something that's changed, and it's changed for the worse, and really everything about that change has ended up being bad. Anyways, all of that bad stuff out of the way, Elemental Hit of the Spectrum, I'm not sure of the numbers of this. It kind of feels like it could be good. This does all 3 types of elemental hit damage, and it seems to have reasonable numbers, but I've just got to play around with this. One of those things I can't be sure about yet. 15% more damage per elemental ailment on the enemy really does scream out. Use me in conjunction with Leadership's Price and also in conjunction with Skitterbots, or just find some other way of applying alternate ailments to the enemy, like maybe sap them somehow. You could use one of the high shields to do that potentially. So there's a few things you can do. It is wand or bow only, it's not melee, but most people don't use elemental hit as a melee skill anyway, because it tends to be better on a wand or a bow, especially a bow usually. Ice Shot of Penetration is next, and this one is going to be one that just needs to be played around with as well. I'm not really going to go into much detail because this was teased in the day 12 setup. Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing is worse than was originally teased. I think the original teased version might have been marginal, but now it's 15% of Flask's recovery amount. It was teased, I think, at 30%. That was making people maybe not excited, but at least willing to try it. I think now this is probably DOA. Hope to be proven wrong. Tornado of Elemental Turbulence is the gem I've had the most requests for advice on how to build it. And my honest answer is probably don't have this as your main skill. The reason for that is that tornadoes move very slowly. So I don't think that's something that you really want to give a shot to. It can definitely be used to supplement on another build. Like on a build that's not dedicated to tornado, you could definitely make it work, but I wouldn't use it as your primary damage dealing skill. It's more something you'll use as boss killer support in conjunction with a build that is already firing a whole bunch of projectiles around it, or something else like that to kill small enemies. Automation we talked about quickly, and then we have Convocation. Convocation's been changed, and it's quite a lot better than it used to be. Essentially, every Convocation gem has had its level changed to 27 in terms of the effect that it's got. And so for most players, overwhelmingly, that's going to be an increase in the level you can get. Interestingly, you can get it much higher than level 1. Like this is one of those gems that's level 1, but you can actually scale it quite a bit higher with a minion helmet that gives it +2. That probably won't do anything. It doesn't for Portal, but we'll have to see if it does do anything. Someone's mentioned in chat a very important point that I did want to raise. I'll raise it after this, but that is the question of Maven exclusive boss drops like Legacy of Fury. Incinerative Expanse and Incinerative Venting, we've got full information for this here. These are gems that I think I'd want to try and play around with on a totem. That's my general rule of thumb. If something looks like it's a potentially interesting channeling skill, stick it on a totem and see if the totem can make it work. If the totem can make it work, like it can with Stormburst, fantastic. If it can't make it work, then it's going to be even worse self-cast. Kinetic Blast of Clustering is really interesting. Added physical damage equal to 15% of your maximum mana. Note that this doesn't specify unreserved. This has a lot of strong synergies with the wand that was teased yesterday as well. So this is definitely something to keep your eye on. Whether this is great, whether this is mediocre, I'm not entirely sure. Next we have Summon Holy Relic of Conviction. This, I believe, is bringing back some of the one of the previously popular alternate qualities for Holy Relic. I never played Holy Relic, so I'm not in a good place to talk about this skill, but I have heard people saying that they're quite excited by it. And Sacred Wisp support we discussed yesterday. This is looking like it's going to be fairly good on Wander builds. Better than their worst support gem for sure, but not necessarily good enough to make a Wander build rise from the ashes. Anyways, that's the things that we were talking about there. Now what I want to do is jump over to the Scarabs and address this thing that's come up in chat with the question of Legacy of Fury. So, POEwiki.net, I'm going to bring up what Legacy of Fury here because this is going to be something that I think people might find a very nasty surprise, depending what grinding gear games have decided to do. I did some discussion in a previous video about the question of what can you expect to get Indigon? And my advice was don't plan on getting Indigon. It's not that it's an impossible item necessarily to get, but it could be moved to Uber Duber Elder, and that could be pretty mean. Well, we don't know if Legacy of Fury is going to drop from the Maven or from the Uber Maven in patch 3.24. And that's going to be something that's potentially very, very, very worrying there. So please keep that in mind when you're planning your league starter. It is fine to work under the assumption I will eventually get Legacy of Fury, but at least be in your mind thinking, this item might be 25 divines for the first week, and it might be 10 divines for the second. If that's the case, does that kill my build? And if the answer is yes, then I would suggest that your league start something else. If the answer is no, I can manage just fine without this item, and if I can get it, it'll be a bonus, then definitely stick with your existing league start. For what it's worth, I am likely to want Legacy of Fury myself, and I'm likely to just endure whatever it ends up being. Okay, so I think that's everything we need to discuss other than the recently asked questions, which I might jump to at the very end. This is primarily a stream discussing Scarabs, so let's get into the Scarabs now. There's been a bit of discussion that's come up in chat about the questions of how rare each Scarab's going to be. The first thing is I don't know, but the second thing that's worth saying is that the existing sextant system has some sextants that are 20 times rarer than others. There's one meme sextant, the alluring sextant, that's 100 times rarer than the common sextants, but most of them, their drop weight is 50, 250, or 1,000. I think some of them might be 100 as well. So 1,000 means common, 250 means 4 times as rare as the common ones, i.e. uncommon, and 50 means 20 times as rare as the common ones, i.e. rare. So, I wouldn't be surprised if the Scarabs follow a somewhat similar logic. So the ones that do something very basic might be drop weight 1,000. Then the ones that do something a bit more special might be drop weight 250 or 100 or 50 or 20 or 500, depending on just how special they are. The key thing is we're not going to know these drop weights. They're going to get worked out when people in Standard open tens of thousands of Veiled Scarabs. That is going to happen, but that's going to take a little bit of time there. So we'll have to keep our eyes on that. Anyways, let's go through everything that's coming through, starting with the unique Scarabs. What we're going to do is go through each category of the Scarabs, and then we'll have a quick discussion of things that you might want to use these with. This is going to be overarching strategies rather than necessarily entire trees, although I do have Path of Pathing handy if we want to see if a tree is feasible. So, let's start with the question of Reliquary Scarabs, 100% increased unique items found in area, limit of 2. This limit of 2 is really important. My understanding of this, and I don't think this has been clarified by Grinding Gear Games yet, is that this means that you can have 2 stacks of Reliquary Scarabs in your map device, and it will drain 1 from each. It does not mean that you can have 1 stack of Reliquary Scarabs in and it will drain 2 from that stack and apply double the effect. At least that's my understanding, but I am not claiming that I'm necessarily right about that. 100% increased unique items found in area is a pretty small deal in most gameplay, but there are a few things that these stack really scarily with. There's a number of things that cause additional uniques to drop, and I would expect that in some cases these will multiply, in other cases they won't. We'll have to get to the bottom of that over time. The key benefit though, these are the Magic Find Scarabs. If you're playing a character that is stacking item rarity as a stat, then this is going to be a very, very big deal. And the limit has apparently been clarified by Mark yesterday. A limit of 2 means that you can have 2 of that Scarab active in a single map at the same time, but the question is more, does that take up 2 of your Scarab slots or 1? And that's the thing. The one thing I'm not sure of is whether it will take from two Scarabs from 1 stack or not. If it does, then that's going to mean that these are going to be incredibly good, because you're just going to use, if it's worth using 1, it's going to be worth using 2. Now, that's the first thing. The second one is the Reliquary Scarab of Overlords. Unique monsters in area drop an additional unique item. Now, they are also increasing the drop rate of tier 0 unique items. This is Mageblood, this is Headhunter, and this is the other various tier 0 uniques like Beano's Kitchen Knife, Divinarius, Lioneye's Glare. There's a whole bunch of them of varying calibers, Calandra's Touch and the Squire being the other 2 that really stand out. So you sort of got a top tier of them, which is Headhunter and Mageblood. You got a second tier, which is Calandra's Touch and the Squire. And then you got a bunch of them that are of mixed quality, but they're all equally rare. They're being made 2.5 times as common by default. And it's been estimated, I'm not sure exactly how accurate this is. Like, I think this is plausible, but the sample size is too small to be sure. It's been estimated about a million unique item drops will generate 10 Magebloods in 3.23. If that's correct, then it's 25 in patch 3.24. So, unique monsters in area dropping an additional unique item. If you can get this to proc 40,000 times, you would on average get 1 of each of the T0s, about 3 of each of the T1s, and an increasing number of all the more common uniques. So that's something that we'll keep in mind. There's been a question asked about the base Reliquary Scarabs and how they stack with each other, because they used to specify more unique items. I think that this is a question of whether they stack with each other. So does Reliquary Scarab number 1 stack with Reliquary Scarab number 2? And the fact they're increased indicates the answer is no. So if it is the case that the Reliquary Scarab of Overlords, if that's accurate, that it's 1 in 40,000 uniques in 3.24 is going to be a Mageblood, then you're starting to think, if you can get 20 unique monsters onto a map, then that's going to be 1 in 2,000 chance to get a direct drop of a Mageblood in that map, and that starts to be pretty impactful. So these are not bad, and that's going to be what's going to set their price. Mageblood, Calandra's Touch, Squire, Headhunter, those big uniques, the small chance, and it'll be people's own assessment. It won't necessarily be the real chance of getting it. It'll be what wealthy players think is the real chance of it. So, next up we have the Reliquary Scarab of Vision, and this one is monstrously good. The Nameless Seer is an NPC that was added in 3.23. If you missed it, he was a very, very rare find, and when you found him, he would completely destroy your Wildwood run, or at least he would offer to. He would give you an offer. Can give him all of the wisps that you've earned in the Wildwood, and effectively destroying the map you're running, and in exchange for that, he will give you a unique. But you'll be able to choose between a bunch of uniques, and some of those uniques will bias towards being much rarer than usual. So, I got him 2 or 3 times. I got 4th Vow one of the times. I got another tier 2 rarity unique. I didn't get anything rarer than that myself, but it was quite common for people to get tier 1s and even tier 0s from the Nameless Seer. He really does drop rarer than expected uniques. Now, it's going to remain to be seen whether he's quite as good in patch 3.24. Now, what's worth noting here, the Reliquary Scarab of Vision is probably no better at super high tiers, and it doesn't seem to scale up with additional juice, whereas the other 2 maps here definitely scale with additional juice. That means they don't really work very well together either. So there's a lot of things to think about. People are discussing, will these work with blighted maps? And I think the answer is no. That's the way that it works in 3.23. There's no discussion indicating it's changing. If it was to be the case that blighted maps were to work in conjunction with these, then Reliquary Scarab of Overlords would be ridiculous on blighted maps. Like, it would be incredibly good there. So that's my expectation there. But, of course, expectations, you don't always get things right when you're speculating, so do keep that in mind. And next up we have the Nico Scarabs. The Sulfite Scarab does actually less than it does in 3.23. It's just going to cause Nico to spawn. It's not going to give you 20% more Sulfite like it does in 3.23. However, the Sulfite Scarab of Greed gets paired in together with the Sulfite Scarab, and that causes you to get 150% more Sulfite, but only if Nico spawns. So, if you're someone who's a casual delver, you can use these to force Nico onto a map, even if you've got no Nico support on your Atlas. But if you've got Nico support in your Atlas, you probably don't care about these Scarabs at all. Sulfite Scarab of Greed does speed things up, but it's not something that's essential. It's up to you if you want to go really fast. Sulfite Scarab of Fumes causes the monsters that are affected by enraging fumes to have 500% increased item quantity. This is a spiritual successor to the Strongbox mechanic that was one of the central pieces of probably even more than top 1%. Like, we're talking top 0.25% play in juicing in most of the last really 10 leagues. One of the strategies, it's not always been the best, but it's always been good, has been to stack as many Strongboxes as you can and to use a sextant mod that was a spiritual precursor to this. Now, that sextant mod is gone. It is gone without replacement, but the Sulfite Scarab of Fumes is going to be something that provides the same effect, but that is going to do so without scaling up as multiplicatively with other things. I am feeling like this is a solid but not spectacular Scarab. That's my initial thoughts on this, but we will find the details on this. It's also definitely the case, I agree with people in chat who are talking about Scarabs being less annoying than Sextants. They're just a lot easier because they stack. Like things stack. Like Sextants don't stack, and that meant that trading for them was a pain. and just either an enormous amount of work, or you've got to load up a trade Discord. Lots of hassle to do. Okay, so in terms of the Sulfite support on the Atlas, I don't really think that there's any essential reason to have a delve-oriented Atlas. You can definitely use a Sulfite Scarab in conjunction with Pact with Energy, which is an Atlas passive node that causes the map to actually become easier as you start picking up more Nico poo piles. But that's not something that you need to do. So here's Delve, Pact with Energy. You gain 1% to all maximum resistances for each Voltaxic Sulfite vein that you've tapped so far this map. You also gain a bunch of damage, but more importantly, movement speed. This is really strong, this node, but it's pretty easy to cap this out anyway. And I just don't see myself giving up a full Scarab slot just to force Nico onto maps for that purpose. That said, there'll definitely be people doing it. How do I think this will work with Meticulous Appraiser is being asked in chat. So this is the Sulfite Scarab of Fumes, the one that causes monsters to have 500% increased IAQ. I need to just check the exact text on the Appraiser node, because it has been moved, hasn't it? It's somewhere around, I can't think where it is. Let's just do a search for it. Appraiser. Here it is. Meticulous Appraiser modifies the quantity of items found in your maps, instead apply to rarity of items. I believe the wording on Meticulous Appraiser actually doesn't work the way you might think. This is a modifier to quantity on the actual map item. So if the map item says 40% quantity and 30% rarity, then this transforms that to be 150% rarity on that map. But what this Sulfite Scarab is doing is modifying the monsters. The monsters drop, and there are a bunch of different things there. So yeah, that's going to be a bit of a messy one to get our heads around. So there will be uses for the Sulfite Scarabs, but I'm not going to say this is something that I would recommend an entire Atlas around. Except that, of course, if you're doing a very juiced map, then yeah, Pact with Energy may be something that gives you that extra bit of power if you need that extra bit of power. Next, we have the craziness that is Divination Scarabs. These are bonkers. 150% increased div cards found in area, limit 2. So this is actually more than the old Winged Divination Scarab, although if you're using 2, and if my belief of how these work is right, that's going to take up 2 of your Scarab slots. Next, though, we have other things that multiply with this. So we have the Divination Scarab of Curation, which lets you modify what divination cards are in a map, and at the same time let you increase the number of divination cards that are found. This thing is really worth having a read of. I think that this could be quite good if you are doing it with a bunch of maps that all provide the Fortunate. So if you favourite a whole bunch of maps that have the Fortunate, and potentially also throw in, of course, every Mageblood map that's available. So when I say Mageblood map, I mean Apothecary maps. Divination Scarab of Curation could be really good there. Burial Chambers is the best of the maps that provide the Fortunate, and that's because the Fortunate is there, but so also is the Doctor. And of course we have the Divination Scarab of Completion. You can tell by the graphics of this being those of a Winged Scarab that it's a big deal. Div cards that drop in the area have a 20% chance to drop as a full stack instead. So what this means is that instead of getting 1 Doctor, on average you get 2.4 Doctors. So it's 140% more multiplier to the number of Doctors that you get. But for larger stack sizes, it becomes better. This is also a 220% more multiplier to the amount of the Fortunate div cards that you get. It is even better. It's a 240% more multiplier on 7 years bad luck. And at the very top end, it is a 300% more multiplier on Unrequited Love, because that card has a massive set size of 16. And that means that if you do get 1 Unrequited Love, because that card is staggeringly rare, it's like twice as rare as the Apothecary, but if you do get 1, then you on average receive 4, because you've got a 20% chance to get a bonus of 15 of them. So this could be interesting in that Divination Scarab of Completion might scream out to you, hey, why don't you consider running Vaal Temple? But then you're thinking, I don't really want to do Vaal Temple, that's a horrible layout. And then you've got Divination of Scarab of Curation. Well, that doesn't let you copy Vaal Temple, because Vaal Temple isn't on the Atlas and you can't favourite it. But there are other maps, there's Maze Map, there's Vaal Pyramid Map, that provide the divination card, provide the divination card in question, Unrequited Love. So there's a bunch of things you can do there that are kind of crazy. And one question that's come up a few times is, can you stack multiple Scarabs that are from the same family? So for instance, can you stack Divination Scarab, Divination Scarab, Divination Scarab of Curation, and Divination Scarab of Completion? My belief is the answer is yes. In fact, they kind of implied that in the FAQ that was done a few days ago. So yeah, that should definitely work. And where they've got a limit of 2, that means you can use 2 of the same Scarab. How do I think this will interact with Eater Altar Divination card duplication? I don't know on that. I feel like it would multiply with it. I feel like it would be multiplicative scaling with it. So yeah, that's going to be something that's worth playing around with. One interesting point that's come up in chat from Prox is saying that, like, if these changes mean that you personally can make more currency, they also mean other people can make more currency, and that means that the rarest items in the league just end up getting inflated out of your reach. And that was sort of visible in 3.23, when a whole bunch of farming methods made a lot more currency than ever before. And that meant that things like the Doriani's Machinarium unique map ended up exploding to new heights in price. Fracturing Orbs, which are normally about 8 divines, ended up in the 40s at one point. And so you do get that sense of inflation. I think one of the things that does counteract that is that we are gaining a bunch of new stuff, but we are also losing stuff at the same time. So we are losing some of the crazy sextant mods. And I feel like this is going to be a league where for the first few weeks, we're going to get a bunch of things wrong with the new sextants. The new Scarabs. But then over time, we're going to pick up more of the things that we should be doing right. And so over time, it'll probably end up getting back to maybe not 323's crazy levels of loot, but higher than 322's. And that will be the new normal. But early weeks, it's going to feel like it's going to be lower. And that's because we're going to get a lot of things wrong. Interesting to see some of the predictions that are coming up as to which will be the most valuable Scarabs. And Divination Scarab of Completion is one that, people have placed guesses on this being one of the most expensive Scarabs. I think that's potentially right. But the other possibility is that you can then The other possibility, though, is that some of the ones that empower really wild stuff may end up more expensive as well. Because you've got to remember, Divination Scarabs, they prevent you from adding more content. They multiply loot, but they don't allow you to add more content. And so there's this bit of a balance between how many monsters do I want in the map versus how much loot should each monster drop. And that's going to be a real balancing act to try and get right. So yeah, lots of things that you can do there. It's going to be a tough one to work out. One question that's also come up in chat: if there are Scarabs that you don't want and that other players don't want, what can you do with them? The answer is, well, sometimes it's going to be to sell them to a player that does have a use for them, have set up their atlas in a way that they're useful. But if they're not useful at all, you can vendor 3 Scarabs and you will receive back a random Scarab that will not match any of the inputs. You're only going to want to put in low value Scarabs for this, but that's something that you can consider doing. That said, I do think a lot of the Scarabs, like, there's not very many here that I think you would likely see people not wanting to use. It may reach a point where we've got so many Scarabs that we end up not able to use them all, and so people fish for the very best ones that way. But that's the use case for them. One thing you'll also notice this is also coming up a bit in chat. I was going to talk about this at this point with Torment, is that there's a lot of things here that are encouraging you to go really hard into stacking your Scarabs with each other. Now, this assumes that you've got access to the rarer Scarabs, because I'm working on the assumption that you can probably sustain things like the base Torment Scarab, but the Torment Scarab of Peculiarity, the Torment Scarab of Release, these things are going to run out if you try and run them every map. It'll be possible for people that trade a lot to do so, but it's going to involve a lot of trading. You're not going to sustain them yourselves. That's my assumption there. But it will be that there'll be some people who will run out of these higher end Scarabs, and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to use 4 different mechanics, and I'm going to use 1 Scarab for each of them. Or maybe only 3 different mechanics, because I haven't yet beaten a tier 17 and unlocked the 5-slot map device, which is being removed from Legion, and it is going into a tier 17 map. So there'll be some people in that situation, but they'll be wanting to be more generalist, but there will be a lot of people who are going hyper focused on one mechanic. and I definitely think that's going to be the case. Alright, so let's have a look at the Torment Scarabs. The numbers on the Torment Scarab are huge. Area is haunted by 5 additional tormented spirits, limit of 4. So this means that you can potentially get 20 tormented spirits into a map, although if my interpretation of what limit of 4 means, that is going to preclude you from using any additional Scarabs on that map. In practice, you're probably not going to want to use 4, unless it turns out that the other interpretation of how limit of 4 works applies, and then you can put in 1 stack of 4 or more Torment Scarabs, and the game will drain 4 of them. If that's the case, then these are going to be absolutely crazy, but if it is the way that I think it is, you're probably not going to want to use 4. Torment Scarab of Peculiarity causes tormented spirits in the area to be replaced with unusual variants. Some of them, particularly the Tormented Embezzler, I believe it is, are fairly lucrative. There's also the ultra rare Tormented Fisherman, but if I talk about that, someone from GGG will probably end up muting me. So we won't talk about that one. No one's ever seen that Fisherman. And instead, most of the rarer ones though, I think it is just really the Embezzler that is special when it's rare. Unless some of the special ones that were previously Sextant only end up available through this. So there's the one that causes the monsters that you kill that are possessed to drop Scarabs. They could be really good. Then we've got the Torment Scarab of Release, which I feel is pretty underwhelming. Tormented spirits in area have a 25% chance to be set free when possessed monsters are slain. Now, this does nothing in conjunction with arguably the most powerful Torment mechanic, which is using Speaker of the Dead, and it also just doesn't strike me as a very powerful effect. If you've got 20, so let's say you've got 15 Tormented spirits in the area, you'd be better off adding another 5 than giving them a 25% chance to be reused. The limit's only 1, so it's not like you can put 4 of these in and just have them be 100% to be released. So I'm not really sold on this one. That said, there could be some use case that I'm not seeing. Maybe there are some of the special Torment Ghosts that come up from the Peculiarity one. Maybe those end up being limited to 1 per map. And in that situation, maybe there's a reason where you do want a 25% more multiplier to how many of them you fight. As for Torment as an overall mechanic, I don't think it's something that is worth an entire Atlas around. Where it is interesting, though, is the Seance notable on the Atlas passive tree. Up to 5 rare monsters in each of your maps are possessed, their minions are touched. This is actually a massive, just net increase to the amount of loot that you get per map. So do keep that one in mind. It's very rippy. It is very, very rippy, but it will cause you to get a lot of additional unique items, especially if you're in solo self-found. Now we've got top left Necropolis node should be able to help a lot with Torment Spirit farming. Eternal Torment. 50% chance to spawn a Tormented Spirit when you collect a corpse in maps. Now, Grinding Gear Games mentioned, I think, that you could expect to get 3 of these in a juiced map. And Haunted Pack Leaders in your maps have a 50% increased chance to be rare. So, yeah, that's possibly that's something that ends up being a useful synergy there. So that's something you could conceivably use with it. Okay, so jumping on to the Anarchy Scarabs, these are more interesting. These are the Rogue Exile ones, and these we do not have enough information to say if they're good or not yet. My intuition is that they're not good, but I could very, very well be wrong. Rogue Exiles don't drop all that much loot at the moment, but you never know how that might change, and also there's ways that you can modify what the Rogue Exiles do. Additionally, Rogue Exiles have a lot of synergy with Torment. There's the Ruckus node here, which causes maps to be pretty wild sometimes, but it's Exiled Will, it's a big one. Rogue Exiles in your maps are possessed by a Tormented Spirit. This is very, very rippy. However, it also is a very big source of random unique items, which again, we were talking about random unique items earlier when we're talking about the Reliquary Scarabs. There's a modest chance, it's a small chance, but it does add up to get them to be a Mage Blood or a Headhunter or something. But one of the key things you've got here is the Reliquary Scarab of Overlords causes unique monsters to drop an additional unique, and that's a big synergy with the Anarchy Scarab. because this is adding 4 additional unique monsters onto the map. And unlike the Torment Scarabs, these are unique monsters that are easily enough killed because they're not going to try and run away from you. So keep this one in mind. Unfortunately, Rogue Exiles are not considered rare monsters. They're considered unique monsters. So that one's not going to work. But yeah, it is going to be that unique Scarab that's the interesting one. Anarchy Scarab of Gigantification. Note the limit of 2 on this. So you can stack 2 of these. Although I think in many cases, this is going to be one you want to use one by one. Rogue Exiles in the area have a 30% chance to be replaced with a Rogue Giant. Now, given the artwork on this looks like it's it looks a little bit more ornate than that on the Anarchy Scarab. It makes me think that this is going to be a rarer Scarab than the Anarchy Scarab is. This will be like the old Rusted Scarab. This will be like the old Polished Scarab. If that's correct, I think what you want to do is go 3 Anarchy Scarabs and 1 Anarchy Scarab of Gigantification if it turns out that there's any good reason to kill these Rogue Giants. That said, we don't know exactly what's going on there. Now, people are talking about the significant troves node on the Atlas. Let's just bring that one up as well, because that is one that I remember seeing now that it's mentioned. Not that one. Not that one. So, unique monsters in your area have 200% increased chance to drop Scarabs. I am absolutely not sold on this unless there's something weird about loot tables in 324. The reason for that is that in 323, Scarabs are basically, they drop anywhere and they're about 1 in 3600, I think, drops is a Scarab. And going from 1 in 3600 items dropped by a boss to 1 in 1200 items dropped by a boss, that means that you go from about 0.3% chance to about 1% chance of getting a Scarab each time you kill a boss. Rogue Exiles will be similar. Rogue Exiles don't have many free drops either. They have a lot of things that are specific. So, yeah, I think that the main use for the Rogue Exiles is going to be for the Anarchy Scarab is going to be to just get more uniques for purposes of that second Reliquary Scarab. I have not played enough of the Veldo maps that have got the special Rogue Exiles to know what they're like. So we'll find that information out. Also, Amplified Artifacts is coming up as something else that people are suggesting with that I hadn't thought of. So Amplified, that's this one, is it? Rare monsters in your maps have 50% increased chance to drop Scarabs per monster modifier affecting them. So again, that just doesn't feel like it's coming from a high place. Even if they've had their drop rate, even if Scarabs as a category have had their drop rate increased to match that of Awakened Sextants, which would be a 8 times increase in the number of them that drop in maps, even then, I'm just not sold that this is particularly good. Now, we'll have to see exactly what it is, but Mark has implied apparently that they're going to be more common, so let's assume that they are the same rarity that Awakened Sextants were, and obviously you don't necessarily get the Scarab you want, but that they are the rarity of Awakened Sextants in 323, then in that case, maybe those nodes will end up having some use, but we'll have to have a look at that. People were saying that builds that could AFK the Feared were dying to Rogue Giants in Veldo maps. That's interesting. So, question of how many uniques do Rogue Exiles tend to drop? If they're not ghosted, like 0.1. If they're ghosted, maybe 1.5, I think. Something along those sorts of lines. So it's not like it's a tremendous amount, but I do think there is some sort of synergy here where you could go 2 Anarchy Scarabs, 1 Reliquary Scarab, 1 Reliquary Scarab of Overlords. That is a probably beginner-friendly strategy that could generate a lot of uniques, but that not necessarily ones you're going to want, because let's face it, the vast majority of unique items that drop are somewhat useful items that have no value because the Trade League is completely flooded with them. Things like Goldrum. Goldrum is a very good item, at least in its niche, but it's also very, very cheap. Anarchy Scarab of Partnership is essentially 50% more multiplier to the number of Rogue Exiles in the area. I would not use this unless you're already using at least 2 Anarchy Scarabs, and then at that point it starts to become marginally better than using a third one of these, and so that is another option. You could go 2 Anarchy Scarabs, 1 Anarchy Scarab of Partnership, and 1 of these. Hey Renata, thank you for the super chat there. Me or Valobs have interesting results. And so that's the Anarchy Scarab setup. Like we're saying, there's a bunch of things you can do with these, but my first thought is probably Anarchy Scarabs, is probably an Anarchy and Torment setup, and this would be aimed around generating lots of unique item drops. So, let's now move on to the next stuff that's going. Someone's asked me about the last video. I mentioned there's a Spectral Shield Throw build discussion happening over on the PathOfExile build subreddit. I did put a link to that in the build summary in the build summary video. There'll be a link to it down there in that. Okay, Ritual is next. Ritual is in a weird place because Ritual already has Scarabs. They're called blood-filled vessels, and they force Ritual onto the map. They also have some fairly unusual effects. I might just bring those up because it's one of the least explored things in PathOfExile, and I'll just like to bring it to people's attention because people don't know how these things work. Like, it's literally something that isn't really known in the entire PathOfExile community. I don't think anyone has any strong ideas of exactly what these do. So they have text on them that says, they do have text in the game files. Let me, not in the game files. They do have text on the trade website. So if I bring up the PathOfExile site, go for a trade, and just have a look for a blood-filled vessel. Blood-filled vessel, doesn't matter what league it's in. Let's just go in standard because Affliction is no more. And okay, that's what we're looking for. Let's bring up the item in question so that everyone that's watching the stream can see it. And you'll see, if I can actually get that right, you'll see here that it's got rituals have 20% improved favor rewards. Improved rewards is a term that is used almost nowhere else in the game. The only other place this is used is on Uber Timeless Emblems. And then it's got the other stats. Rituals spawn monsters 20% faster, 20% more maximum monsters alive. Improved favor rewards used to be a brokenly OP stat, but that was only in patch 3.14. It's been nerfed since, but it's really hard to say exactly what it does. There was some discussion of coming up with a strategy for testing it, but it's never really taken off. So, that's something that we don't know the details of. But all I wanted to really point out there is that Ritual already does have Scarabs. So, we just want to remember that they're a thing. Now, Omens have been added to Rituals, yes, and they're not going to have a big impact because presumably the Trash to Treasure Omen, which is the one that you really care about, presumably that's being added into the Tier 1 rarity pool for Ritual, and Tier 1 Ritual rewards are staggeringly rare. Like, we're not talking 1 per 30 maps, we're talking like 1 per 250 maps with a max Ritual spec. And even when you do get one of them, most of the time it's a pretty underwhelming. Like, it's sort of okay, but it's pretty underwhelming. It's either a Tier 1 rarity unique that most of which are 15C in trade, or it's a rare divination card, some of which are good, but even the nurse is rare enough to get in there, or it's a stack of 3 or 4 exalts, divines, or annuls. Now, you never complain about getting a stack of 4 divines, but even then, with how rare they are, it's not anything amazing. So, ranting about Ritual aside, Ritual I do think has some real uses in this league. And that's what we'll discuss here, is that actually thinking about the Ritual favors might actually be a little bit of a red herring. So keep that in mind. But let's just quickly judge this. Rerolling favors is free the first 2 times, and you can do it once more. These are pretty solid. If you were going to force a Ritual strategy, you do want to use these. You can use them twice. You want to generally reroll aggressively in Ritual. You're fishing for the jackpots. The small stuff doesn't really add up to much. Then we have unique enemies slain at Ritual altars grant 1200 instead of 400 tribute. I think they always grant you 400 by default. This is terrible. This is always worse than using a Ritual vessel. And then we have Ritual Scarab of Abundance, which causes them to give 100% increased favors. So this basically means that every time you re-roll, you see twice as many items, or 3 times if you use 2 of these. I think the best strategy, if you really are set on forcing Ritual, it's probably to use 1 Ritual Scarab of Selectiveness, 1 of Abundance, and 1 or 2 Blood-Filled Vessels. However, that is talking about Ritual in terms of the items that come out of the loot from it. And with the question someone's raised about will Mageblood and Headhunter be more common in Ritual, they are so rare in Ritual that even much more common uniques like Arakali's Fang are just unfathomably rare in Ritual. So I don't think it's really that important that you can get stuff like Mageblood and Headhunter more often there, because the drop rate is so low in Ritual. You're more likely to get it off a monster in the zone, I think. Someone's just pointed out they're behind on the stream. If you are in that situation, you do have the option of rewinding on YouTube. And once you get to the start of the stream, you can then jump it on at 125, 150, 175, or even 200% speed until you catch up if you want to do that. So that's an option that you've got. Now, the main reason that you want to talk about Ritual Low is that it puts a lot of extra monsters onto the map. And whilst there are some diminishing returns on monsters you kill multiple times in a Ritual eventually stop giving you loot, those kick in a little bit late. And as a result, it may well be something you want to experiment with, is using Ritual Scarabs or Rituals in general, more so using Ritual in general as a mechanic to then fight a lot more rare monsters on a map or fight a lot more unique monsters on a map. Especially because there's a number of things that have really strong synergies with that, like unique monsters in the area drop an additional unique item, or a very explosive rare monster altering Scarab that exists later. Ultimately, I think that is the key thing you want to do with Ritual, is find something that generates a lot of rare monsters, whether it be Abyss, whether it be Ritual, and use that in conjunction with something that modifies all rares. Now, jumping on to Harvest next, we have the area contains a Sacred Grove. This is going to be extremely, extremely strong. Just more access to the Grove means that Harvest Goo is going to be way more common than it's been in the past. Harvest Scarabs is something that, like, Harvest was a mechanic. It was one of the few Kirak mods that was worth paying high prices for, at least in Trade League. And this is going to be interesting. It's going to have quite an impact on the Trade League economy. Harvest Goo is going to be more available than usual, but there's less of a chaos sink because Harvest was a big chaos sink, even in leagues where you had to use 7th Gate to get it. So that's something that we'll need to think a little bit on there, but I do think that's going to have large flow-on effects. Someone's pointing out in chat that Essence stuff may not work with monsters that aren't native to the map. So that Essence of calcification thing may not apply with Ritual, may not apply with Abyss or Legion. It definitely doesn't apply with Legion, apparently, and presumably doesn't apply with other similar mods. So in that case, maybe you want to find something else. Harvest Scarab of Doubling, doubles the life force. And this is really strong. This is the old Sextant mod. And again, we're talking about how you're going to get a lot more Harvest Goo. But the big one, the really big one, is this. If the area contains a Sacred Grove, it will contain up to one additional tier 4 seed of each type, if possible. This basically is the Harvest memory as an itemized Scarab instead. This is going to provide you with tremendous amounts more access to the tier 4 ones. I think this is going to be a very rare Scarab. It has the image of the old wing Scarabs, which is generally being tied to the more powerful and the rarer Scarabs. And I think this one's going to be very rare, but very, very good. And people will definitely be fighting this a lot. One thing we need to ascertain is what the minimum level is for fighting these things, and whether it's worth using this in low tier maps that are rolled incredibly aggressively. So that's something you'll have to figure out. Like, you can sometimes find 145% item quantity 8 mod horrible map that's low tier, and then you can run something like this in it if and only if the tier 4 seeds can spawn there. I do think that tier 4 seeds are tier 13 plus, but I am genuinely unsure on that. The big one is indeed unusable with crop rotation, I believe, and that's been coming up in chat a little bit as well. So crop rotation is the one that causes harvest crops to only contain tier 1 plants. So yes, that does mean that it does not work. That is a complete and utter non-bo. They do not work together at all. You do not want to use Harvest Scarab of Cornucopia if you have that Atlas node set up. Okay, so in terms of harvest, it's pretty straightforward. You just want to use this with as much of a focus on harvest as you can get, and then you just want to probably avoid the rippiest mechanics unless your character is ridiculously strong, and then you can potentially go with all of the things that increase the number of mods that are on each map. But I think for harvest, it's something you can do on fairly chill, otherwise elk and go maps. You just chisel, elk, your map, and then you apply whatever harvest scarabs are appropriate, and you go and run it, and maybe on the side you run some other content as well. Can you get double juice from the Atlas and the Scarab? That's a good question. You shouldn't be able to duplicate it twice. Shouldn't be able to duplicate that twice there. Bestiary Scarabs are next, and there's a really surprising one here. So, the first Bestiary Scarab forces an Einhar mission. This is essentially a replacement for the old Einhar daily missions. Broadly speaking, these are not worth using unless you're in a situation where you have some setup on your Atlas to support Bestiary, because these monsters, they tend to be just quite unpleasant to fight, and unless you spec appropriately on the Atlas, and when I say spec appropriately, what I really mean is taking a couple of key nodes. You want the Hunt for Creation, so that you are more likely to get Krakic Chimerals, and you want Natural Selection, so that you are more likely to get Krakic Chimerals. You can also take Phenomenal Plagued Arachnids in some environments, so that's the Hunt for Venomous, which is here. So in some situations you would go 1, 2, 3 of these nodes, and you definitely don't take the Farrell and Sakawal ones. In other League economies, which are more common, you just take Creation and Natural Selection. If you don't have those, then Einhar missions are pretty disappointing. I generally find that they're just really mediocre. That said, Bestiary Scarab of the Herd, plus 5 red beasts, and you can have 2 of these. So if you want to go absolutely crazy on beast farming, then you can go Bestiary Scarab and 2 Bestiary Scarabs of the Herd on an Atlas that is spec'd with the Hunt for Creation and the rarer beasts are more common, and that's something that will make it so that you are much more likely to see those Krakic Chimerals, the imprint beasts. And then of course you've got the Bestiary Scarab of Duplicating, which is the most important of the lot. That one creates a copy of beasts that are captured in area. So if you do find one of the magic frogs, then you don't get one of them, you get 2. Finally though, we have the Bestiary Scarab of the Shadowed Crow. This allows you to encounter the Black Morrigan encounter from the 3.23 expansion if it contains Einhar. Now, apparently this guy can be captured as a beast, and we don't know what he does. So there'll be a whole bunch of information there that will have to come up with time. In terms of Bestiary, is there anything you really want to align this with? One of the things that is notable with Bestiary is that it doesn't get better as the monster level goes up. In fact, Bestiary gets slightly worse as the monster level goes up. And that's because there's a number of beasts that come online that fill out the loot tables. They're not terrible. They're actually better than average, but they slightly crowd out the chance of getting those Krakic Chimerals. And as a result, it's generally considered optimal from a pure Bestiary perspective to do this in a tier 1, 2, 3, or 4 maps, sometimes 5. Those are the tiers that you want to be doing beast encounters in normally. And also, Bestiary doesn't seem to scale much with the mods that might be on a map. Other mechanics that you want to do in low tier maps, it used to be essences, and I'm kind of feeling that you could well do essences in tier 6 maps, and essences seem to be at full power in tier 6 maps. So if you want to do a low tier map strategy, it's probably Bestiary plus essences in tier 6 maps, and then you want to pick a map that's got good divination cards. That'd be the way that I would think of going about there. And that's my first thought. It is worth noting that yes, we know now that there is definitely not going to be that which was taken. Now, something that's come up as a potential possibility as well there is using Essence Scarab of Calcification in conjunction with these beasts. Bestiary Scarab of the Herd, and forcing an Einhar mission, which you'd actually do from your Atlas rather than from a Bestiary Scarab. That is definitely something that is intriguing as an option. This puts a lot of additional rare monsters onto a map. And if it's a tier 6, I believe they can roll the best tiers of Essence mods. and so that's going to be something to definitely consider there. Yeah, all of the beasts are rare monsters. There's no uniques, possibly except for the new Black Morrigan. Black Morrigan might be unique here. I think the issue, like, just to give people a sense of exactly what the biasing is in terms of the rare beasts. So it is believed, and this is not known, but it is believed that each of the beasts is either a drop rate of 100 or a drop rate of 8. And the ones people care the most about are a drop rate of 8. Now, all of the ones that come online at level 68 are drop rate of 100, except for Phenomenal Plague Arachnid and the Krakic Chimeral. Actually, Phenomenal Plague Arachnid might be about 25 drop rate, but the Krakic Chimeral is probably 8. That's what it's speculated to be. Now, that's before you have more likely to get the rarer versions of beasts. All of the beasts that come online at higher levels, like the ones that open portals to the bestiary bosses, these are pretty low drop rates. None of them are drop rate 100, so it's not like it really crangles the drop rate. If you go to a tier 14 map where every beast in the game can spawn, then you're not going to get much worse. It's just going to be a smidgen worse, but it does take longer. I wouldn't be opposed to the moving Krakic Chimerals to a higher tier, but also sometimes it's good to have something that, you know, casual players can get early in their playthrough as well. Although, honestly, they're not going to recognize a beast and trade it, so it's probably not the right idea. And yeah, you can have some absolutely crazy encounters with beasts in tier 17 maps, I expect. Wonder how the Black Morrigan ends up being, like how difficult that is in the new version of the fight. Anyways, next we have the Influencing Scarabs. You can add Shaper Influence, you can add Elder Influence. These are tremendous disappointments. These are going to be feed for the 3-for-1 recipe in most cases, I think. Influencing Scarab of Hordes comes up next. This causes monster packs that are influenced in the area to have a 40% pack size increase. This is massive. Like, this thing is absolutely incredible. This is at its best on Elder Slayer occupied maps, I believe. I think this is absolutely crazy on them. And it may also be that you can use an Influencing Scarab of Hordes in addition to an Elder or Shaper one, and on a map that is already an Elder Slayer occupied one, and that may end up being fantastic as well. Additionally, I think Influence monster packs in area have 40% increased pack size. This should work on Eldritch Influence as well. This has got to be tested out, but the wording implies that it does. So that could be really good to try out. If it does work, then 40% increased pack size is a big multiplier to your altars as well, because altars appear to be a rare proc when you kill one of the Eldritch Influence monsters. So getting 40% more monsters ends up meaning 40% more altars, but then that 40% more altars ends up spawning new packs as well. I don't think we can get to a point that is self-sustaining, but yeah, I'm pretty sure we can't, but it'd be interesting if we could. Now, we have the Influencing Scarab of Conversion. This is a potentially big deal, but the numbers, we don't know what they are. Tier 14 plus maps found in area have a chance to drop as Atlas mini-boss maps. Shaper Guardian, Elder Guardian, Conqueror, or Unique Synthesis maps instead. Now, it all depends upon what that number is. If that number is 10%, then this Scarab is mediocre. If that number is 30%, then this Scarab is solid. If that number is 75%, then this Scarab is a replacement for the extremely powerful and extremely rare sextant mods, that used to guarantee Elder Slayer boss maps and things like that. So this could be good. JJab is asking in chat, can you rewind the live stream? You can already rewind it if you want. You can rewind it now, and you can watch it at a different speed if you prefer. Or alternately, this will be just a typical video on demand afterwards. It'll just be like a normal YouTube video once it finishes. The other thing that's interesting here is that it's potentially, this has actually come up in chat as well, the Influencing Scarab of Hordes will mean that you'll get more of your Eater of Worlds and Searing Exarch currency in maps. You're not really going to get more of the rarer currencies, the Eldritch Chaos, Eldritch Annul, Eldritch Exalt type orbs, but you will receive more of the more common ones. The things like the Grand Exceptional Ember, the greater exceptional ember, the lesser exceptional ember. That's not what I mean. Grand Eldritch Ember, Grand Eldritch Ichor, and the greater and lesser versions of those. So that's something else that's going to be a big factor. You'll get more of that sort of stuff. For what it's worth, the drop mechanics of Eldritch Annuls, Eldritch Chaos, and Eldritch Exalts, these seem to be drop anywhere loots that is 10 times rarer than Divine Orbs. And on top of that, they also come from the Infinite Hunger and the Black Star, even more so than the Searing Exarch and the Eater of Worlds. So we'll see exactly how common they end up being. I think they'll be very rare and they'll be very in demand this league. I did a video speaking of the question of crafting boots in 3.24 with the changes to Veiled Orbs. I did do a video on that will be available. I think I linked it down in the description. If I haven't linked it in the description, it won't be hard to find on the channel. Okay, so Influencing Scarabs. I think the Influencing Scarab of Conversion is something that's potentially just worth using in conjunction with Cartography Scarabs when we get to those. And I'm actually surprised it wasn't put as a Cartography Scarab instead. This feels like it should have been named Cartographer's Scarab of Conversion, and there's a Delirium one that I think should have been called Pathological Cartographer's Scarab, or Scarab of the Pathological Cartographer. We'll get to that one later. That's one of the ones I'm most excited about, actually, of all of the Scarabs. And yeah, people are asking, how do you get Cortex now? Cortex now does not come from synthesize. It does not have the same drop mechanics it used to have. It used to be that Cortex was just something that could roll. You'd get an Altered Distant Memory 20% of the time, a Cortex 20% of the time, rewritten Distant Memory 20% of the time, etc., etc. Now, when you hit that roll that you're going to get a synthesized map, it's 25% to be each of the 4 types. However, when you complete those and kill a boss, there's a reasonable chance to get a Cortex map, and when you complete Maven's Invitation the Forgotten, you get a second chance at getting that Cortex map. So do expect to see that there'll be people running cycles of synthesized maps, chasing those Cortexes, and then those Cortexes will then be fed into people who are then running cycles of the Feared as well. There'll be a lot of trading, honestly, in this league. I think there'll be a lot more trading of endgame content than's been happening in the past, because people will get things that, like, you'll be able to specialize in running something specific at endgame, which kind of has been happening, but you'll be generating things you're not really that interested in running sometimes. Will Cortex still be sold by Kirak, or did they remove that as well? I don't think they explicitly said they were removing it, but I wouldn't be shocked, because it feels like it's being moved around. And yeah, it might not be in Kirak missions anymore either. It's just being changed. It's being positioned more as a drop from Atlas mini bosses. Next, we have the Harbinger setup. Harbinger Scarabs contain 3 additional Harbingers, and these have a limit of 4, which is just going to be crazy. So you can have 12 Harbingers on a map if you want, but doing so will preclude you from using any of the better Harbinger Scarabs we'll get to in a sec. We then have the Harbinger Scarab of Discernment. This causes them to drop rarer currency shards, and also, when you kill a Harbinger, it's going to drop a single type of currency shard. This is actually a real quality of life improvement, because it means that you're not going to find your loot. It's like, let's say that you've got things you're always going to pick up. Exalt shards, you're always picking them up. Annulment shards, you're always picking those up. Instead, they're all going to drop in one place. So it's not going to be, you kill one monster, it drops 2 Exalt shards. You kill another Harbinger, it drops none. You kill another one, it drops 1. You kill another one, it drops 0. So you've got your loot has been scattered into 2 different places. Instead, that'll all be in one place. So I think this one's cool. I really do like this as an option. And I think this will be something you want to use if you're doing a Harbinger strategy. So you'll probably want to go with 3 of these, and one of these is the base level Harbinger strategy on top of a Harbinger Atlas. Then we have the Scarab of Regency, which causes them to be more likely to be replaced by powerful Harbinger bosses. You still have this as a stat on the passive tree, 25% of it, but now you can get that up to 75%. And this one is pretty good. And finally, currency shards dropped by Harbingers in area are duplicated. So if you are really going crazy and giga-juicing your Harbingers, then this is going to be worth it. In practice, I think this might be an expensive Scarab and you might not want to use it. And In terms of the question, one that's come up is, how do you get bulk scarabs? This is a good question that's been asked in chat here. I think it's worth going through quickly. If you want to buy someone else's entire tab of scarabs that they don't want, then that's a job for trade discords. Probably the Forbidden Trove trade discord will be it's the most popular of them, but you can use any of them and just make sure the counterparty does actually put in all the scarabs that they say they're going to. If you're wanting to buy bulk of the same scarab, it is definitely the bulk trade section of the PathOfExile website. So bulk trade on scarabs is really misleading though, because a lot of people won't leave a map if they've only got 3 of them, but if they've got larger amounts, they're going to charge a premium to come out. So lots and lots of stuff. My interpretation, something else that's come up in chat, is that this discernment one, I'm interpreting this differently to some people in chat. My interpretation is that each harbinger that is in the area, so harbingers in area simply means every harbinger that is in this zone, each one of them rolls its own type of currency shard. So you kill one of them and it drops 27 chaos shards. You kill the next one, it drops 23 mirror shards. You kill the next one, it drops regal shards instead. You probably won't get the mirror shards. That would be reasonably big fluke. That's my understanding of this. Other people though are understanding that this means the area. Every single harbinger in the area only drops that same type of currency shard. Whatever the case, this is going to cause some big drops of mirror shards for like one person. It's going to be miraculously rare when it happens. And there's also going to be the same for fracturing orbs. Like, you're going to get people who are going to take screenshots where they've got 47 fracturing shards in one place. And this Harbinger Scarab of Discernment will be the reason for that. So, yeah, there's the potential for these to be quite valuable as Scarabs. We'll have to see exactly how all of that shakes out. I feel like it depends on whether this is one of the Scarabs we can target. So there's a number of Scarabs that you can double your chances of getting. We have Essence Scarabs, Beyond, Torment, Reliquary, Cartography, Anarchy, Ambush, Harbinger. You can target Harbinger that way. So that's only 100% more likely, and that will mean that that's 100% at the expense of other things going away. So yeah, you can target Harbinger Scarabs if you want, and I feel like that could be quite good. All right, let's have a quick look at the other things that we've got in here. So, Harbinger Scarabs, in terms of other stuff you might want to consider, Harbingers put a lot of rare monsters onto the map, but I don't think they're going to synergize with the Essence Scarab of Calcification. Just trying to think if there's anything else that really jumps out. Rare Scarab-wise, there's the Special Scarabs. Horn Scarab of Nemesis does something explosive with them, but I don't know that it's something you really want. And so I don't really see exactly where you would be scaling those rare monsters from it. They definitely do put a lot there, but I don't know that you can make everything else work. Now, the new Atlas is coming from Path of Pathing, which is something that's put out by streamer Lilylicious, and it is a really, really useful tool. It is just, if you do a Google search for Path of Pathing, it'll be the first thing that comes up. Okay, Abyss. Abyss seemed to be on the more disappointing side, although you do have your 2 additional Abysses. 75% increased monsters is the second one. Rare Abyss monsters have a chance to drop an additional rare item with an Abyss socket. Even though the number on this is high, I still think that this is complete rubbish. It is just so unlikely to get a rare item with an Abyss socket that's any use at all. It takes very targeted farming to make these work. You can make them you can craft these with hollow fossils, and they're potentially very, very good. But it takes a lot of setup to make them work well, and this will not give you that setup. This will just apply the hollow fossil to the item. I think this is the first rarest Scarab that is a complete dud. That's my first thought there. Abyss Scarab of Edifice. Abysses in area that do not lead to an abyssal depths lead to a Stygian Spire, and abysses in area spawn hordes as they travel. This has to be tested. I think that this is at least mediocre, but I'm not convinced that it's good. Ultimately, the Abyss setup that I like here is to take 75% increased monsters twice, 2 additional Abysses, and on the Abyss tree, grab, of course, the massive snake so that you get heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps and heaps of monsters in every Abyss. And on top of that, you can then pick up the thing that gives you the additional XP. Where's it? 50% increased experience, 50% increased monsters. That is the core of what Abyss looks like. And essentially it ends up being a way to just add more monsters, add more drops from the base drop pool, and potentially this is one of the best Scarabs sources in the game. Because I don't think there's going to be much competition for Abyss Scarabs, but I do think that when you run an Abyss, you're probably going to get a Scarab a lot of the time, just by virtue of Abyss creating so many items. So this might be one that's good. Additionally, Abyss could be good with Beyond. And Beyond also works with Ritual, and there is some support for Beyond here. So that's another thing that could be interesting. Truton's asking in chat, can you fracture Abyssal sockets? Yes, you can, but that's going to cost you a lot to do. And any way that you do that, it's going to cost you a lot. So there's a lot of interesting stuff that you can get going here. And yeah, you can get the 5 and 6 mod Abyss jewels, and the Abysses spawning hordes as they travel could be very good for that. So Abyss Scarab of Edifice and also the snake at the top, that could potentially be a good setup there. That's in conjunction with the node that causes, it's called Corrupted Gaze. Abyss jewels found in Abyssal Troves or dropped by Spires have a 20% chance to be corrupted in an unusual state that otherwise can't exist with 5 or 6 mods. Key thing though is that most people that are running Abyss jewels at the moment are running an Adorned setup, and nothing here really works well with the Adorned. Nothing really pulls together everything with Adorned. Okay, let's talk about Essence next. Essence has gone from having just a small amount of support in Sextants to now having a massive amount of support in Scarabs, but at the same time, the Atlas passive tree support for Essence has gone down. My understanding of the way that Essence is going to play out overall is that Essences are going to be worse if you are running tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 maps, and if you're running 6 and up, it's potentially at least as good as it used to be. So, base Essence Scarabs, plus 2 additional Essences, limit of 4. You don't want to use 4 because you definitely want to use an Essence Scarab of Ascent. This thing is going to be one of the most fundamentally important strategies for a popular early league strategy for people. This is going to be a Scarab that's going to be very important early on. Very, 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 very important early on. Next, we have the Essence Scarab of Stability, which causes remnants of corruption used in the area to be a lot better. That said, Essence Scarab of Ascent is better, and I don't think that much of your currency comes from remnants of corruption with essences. It is something, it is useful, and this does make them quite a bit better, but I don't think it's necessarily better than just throwing another Essence Scarab in. And then we have the Calcification one, which is transformative. If you are using Calcification, then you must use these two as well. Ascent and also Stability, you definitely use these two. And then you want to find ways to get more rare monsters into your map. So there's a lot to play around with in Essences, but I think your starting point here is just going to be to run a basic league start setup on your Atlas, then throw in 2 Essence Scarabs and 1 of Ascent whenever you can, and until you get your hands on the unlock for the 5th map slot, at which point you just go to 3 Essence Scarabs, 1 of Ascent. I think that will be a pretty strong setup there. That'll be something that will get you going really well with currency early on, especially because I feel it might be a bit more fiddly than in the past, which might drive a few people away from it. Yeah, I'm not doubting that this is a big upgrade to the outcome of a Remnant of Corruption. I'm just not sold that Remnants of Corruption are amazing. Like, I guess, like, it takes away 2 bad outcomes. So it sort of makes them, it does make them a lot better. Maybe I'm misinterpreting this, and it's better than I think. It's definitely not as good as of Ascent. But the Calcification one, yeah, this is crazy good, and it's just a matter of what rare monsters it works on, because if it works on in conjunction with Einhar, then that's the way you want to go. Essence, Einhar, get going. That's going to then provide you a whole bunch of extra rare monsters in the area, especially with that +5, that Scarab that provides +5 additional red beasts. That setup's going to be fantastic. That will be a really powerhouse crafting and trade, especially crafting strategy that I think a lot of people will try and use. If it does turn out, though, that this is only the native monsters that are in the zone, then it's quite a bit worse. We just got to work out what it is. Can you use 2 Rusted Essence Scarabs in a map, is being asked in chat. Yes, you can use 3. You can use 4 if you want as well. Question to explain how Crystal Resonance works now. So let's just bring that one up. It's Crystal Resonance. A map boss is granted a random essence modifier from any imprisoned monsters slain in your maps. So if you run to the map boss first, if you kill a map boss before you've done any essence monoliths, then this is going to do nothing. But if you kill at least 1 essence monster first, then the map boss is going to be granted one of those essence mods, which presumably means that it will drop the appropriate essence. Using Remnants of Corruption on an imprisoned monster in your map replaces all essences with one of the essences on the imprisoned monster. I figure what this means is that, let's say you've got a Shrieking of Dread, and you've got a Wailing of Zeal. They're your 2 essences that are on a monster. My reading of that second line is that if you apply a Remnant of Corruption, it then picks Wailing Zeal or Shrieking Dread, and it just gives the monster 2 copies of that same essence. And that's the way I think it works, but I'm not sure that I'm right. We'll just have to test it out and see what it does. So you could target a specific essence first. Yeah, you could definitely run through the entire map, find the essence that has the highest average tier, kill that essence, then go kill a boss. I think that would work, but it's also going to be very clunky. It's the whole way that your ritual can be really clunky and annoying sometimes. So you've got to see how it works, but as I say, I think the key thing with Essence is going to be how it interacts with beasts, and specifically how it interacts with that 5 additional rare beasts in the map, red beasts in the map. If that works, then that's going to be one of those strategies that could be really good. Let's jump down to Domination now. So here we've got the 2 additional shrines. This has a limit of 4. This is not the strongest of these Scarabs, but because it's not as strong, and it is genuinely useful, it'll be very easy to source these if you want them. I don't think the 3-for-1 recipe is going to be so lucrative that people are going to be using marginal shrines like this. They're going to be using bad ones. One of the best things about Domination Shrines is that they make the entire map easier because they give you a character power burst. And sometimes you get a Divine Shrine. Sometimes you get a Divine Shrine and it makes you ridiculous for the rest of it. We have the one that causes you to get an unusual shrine, which I believe is the shrines that you can't otherwise proc. So this would probably be Gloom Shrines, and there's a few others. The Charge Shrine, things that existed in the game only when you were adding them with a sextant. I figure that this is going to be what these do. You can apply 2 of them. It's probably weaker, actually, than the base Domination Scarab. So this is something that'll be a bit of interesting and fun rather than something particularly strong. Shrine buffs in area also grant 30% increased experience gained is going to be really cool. Like, this is something you want to get going in really weird circumstances. I think there may be a situation where people start running tier 16 maps with betrayal missions and shrines and use these Domination Scarabs of Teachings to just get a lot of really safe XP. It probably will be better than any of the heist strategies for XP, and heist is actually pretty good for XP if you want to do it super safe. This may even be safer. That said, it's worth noting that 5-way services look like they've been nerfed in 3.24. I might just bring that up. The patch notes thing. Have I still got the patch notes open? I do not still have the patch notes open. Okay, there's a line of text in there that's a little bit unclear, but my interpretation of it is that if you're in a 6-player group in the Domain of Timeless Conflict, it takes 12 seconds to start the instance going, but only 2 seconds to reset it. each time. If you're in a 1-player group, it's 2 seconds to start, 2 seconds to reset. If you're in a 3-player group, 6 seconds to start, 2 seconds to reset. I think they may be changing it to 12 seconds and 12 seconds if it's 6-player, 6 seconds and 6 seconds if it's 3-player, etc., etc. That would be a crushing nerf to the five-way farming strategies. So we'll have to see that. Domination apparently is 3 chaos this league and adds 3 additional shrines, and that will be really significant. Essentially, what you want to do here is probably even use the gull, the unique helmet, the gull. Really, really good with this, and just zoom through maps. This is extra packs, and it's extra monsters to kill, and it's extra power for you while you're killing them. This would be used on a boss rush strategy. So if you were doing something like a destructive play, let's actually construct a sort of atlas for this. I think that'll be something that could be interesting to do. Pathing, we will go. We want to allocate everything that's shrine related except for the Rippy node. So shrines are here. Let's go take everything. This is Pathing is now allocated what it thinks is an easy path. We actually don't want this node, but we do want this one. So yes and no. The reason we don't want this is this does provide more loot, but it actually makes the map more dangerous. And we're just trying to make the maps easier at the moment. Then we're going to pick up Baran. I'm going to pick up Remnants of the Past. We're going to pick up Vivid Memories. And we're going to pick up Destructive Play. This is a really simple Atlas setup, and it's only 55 points, but this is then something you would use with Domination Shrines and the unique helmet, the Gull, if you can get it. By the time you get to the map boss arena, you are going to be a god with all of those shrine mods. And that's going to be crazy. And yeah, people are saying to add the Nico thing that gives you the extra power. So that's here, isn't it? Packed with Energy. We'd add that. We would then path through here instead, which we probably still want that node though. And then we want to look and see how much Nico chance do we need? We need a bit more Nico chance. So yes, yes. Don't actually care about anything else here. We want this and this, yes. That's just really changed around the ordering. That's probably right though. Additional sulfite chance we don't really care about. Mining byproducts is nice if you can get it, but it's not critical. I figured that this is the setup you would use. This is a very basic starting point, and the thing that would synergize with this is Heist. So the reason you want Heist is that Heist is something that takes 0 time in each map, but that adds a whole bunch of loot. So you would then go yoink, yoink. Actually, just take everything for Heist and then unspec the bad nodes. That's not very good. Yeah, that's what you want. So yeah, this is a potential Atlas that you could play. And in fact, this would be something I would consider shortlisting. What you would then do is throw a whole bunch of your extra shrines on using the Scarabs, and that's going to make you just zip through faster in maps. I think on people who are talking about the Maven, Shessus is mentioning in chat not having beaten the Maven yet. One of the key things with the Maven is it's one of the first bosses in the game that it's probably actually the first one that really puts some demands on your character and simultaneously on you knowing her moveset. I did a guide to the Maven some time ago. I think it was back in patch 3.15. You should be able to find that if you search on the channel. And that will teach you a moveset. The other thing that you want to do, though, that's very important with the Maven, it's one of those fights that you can lose control of if you don't have much damage. It's not that you can't do it, but I would say it's a genuinely difficult fight if you don't have at least 1 million sustainable DPS in a long fight. So that's something that you may want to look up as to the exact sort of things that you're failing with, that are causing you to fail. The other thing that you could consider doing is recording your gameplay against the Maven. Work out what's killing you. This is how I learnt the Maven. It's how I learnt the Uber Maven. It's how I learnt Uber Elder. Whole bunch of fights that I learnt when I was struggling with them. I'd record my gameplay and I'd be like, okay, I failed that set. What caused me to fail it? And eventually I realized with the Maven that the key thing was that I was failing to execute on the bad ground that she drops, and I was putting it in the wrong spots. And the reason I was doing that was I was focused on other things that didn't matter. So that was the thing that was causing me to fail Maven attempts. And you just start learning this over time. You're trying to work out not just what mechanic killed me, but what was the ultimate cause of why I got hit by that mechanic. So there's a whole lot of stuff to go with there. Anyways, this is very much a draft atlas. I don't think that with an atlas like this, you want 2% increased modifier effect on your maps. I think that's actually probably a bad stat. You don't want to path through there. You want to path through here instead, even though it requires more points. So maybe if we just ban that node, how do we do that? It's right, is it? Like that. Okay, yeah. And that's path of pathing for you. Once you tell it, I'd like you to rethink your setup. It will rethink the setup for you and it'll come up with something really good. This site is phenomenal. Like, it's just absolutely amazing for just working out a draft for an atlas. You can then work out further on it later. So let's just keep a copy of that, because that's something that's an interesting use case for some of the shrines, some of the scarabs that I think people will find more disappointing. Incursion. Area contains Elvar. This is just replacing a scarab. This is just replacing master missions. Area contains additional packs of incursion monsters. Now this throws them into the map itself, and it's a lot of additional packs. Like if you use 2 of these, this is potentially 28 packs of monsters. So that could be good just in a general juicing strategy. You don't need to be Elva focused. The Incursion Scarab of Champions is something that basically doubles down on the time dilation cluster on the tree. You can take this twice, and as a result, you can end up guaranteeing that every single incursion in the area has every monster in it being magic, and as well as that, you have tremendous amount of pack size. This is something that's generic juicing again. All of this is generic juicing. Just in chat, JJab is asking about Uber Eater and the tracking laser. Yeah, you have to dodge that. That is a dodge or die unless you've got meme level defenses. So what you want to do for that ability, once you recognize that the Uber Eater is casting it, you want to move closer to the boss and then run in circles around it. Next, you have the Incursion Scarab of Timelines. Final Architect slain in the area drops an itemized temple that respects the layout of your current temple, but randomizes the room tiers. So it remembers the rooms that you've got, but it doesn't remember the tiers that you've got. Essentially, this is a more multiplier to Locuses of Corruption. It's a 33% more multiplier to them, and it's something you only want to use when you've got a fairly developed temple. But it's very, very good. Very, very, very good. Did I talk about the last Shrine Scarab? I missed the last Shrine Scarab. Thanks, BRW, in chat, for pointing out something that I had walked straight past. We will go back to the Shrine Scarabs in a sec. The Incursion Scarab of Timelines is one that some people have been excited by this. I feel like this is going to settle as like quite a bit worse than 1/3 of a Locus of Corruption, but it is going to mean there's a lot more Locuses around. Definitely going to mean a lot more Locuses around. It's also going to mean that sometimes people are going to waste this because they're not going to read exactly what it does. It respects the layout of your temple at that time. That includes all the connections you've made in it. There might be a meta that develops of not taking the option to have 4 incursions in each zone, so only having 3 Elva portals. Then you go into your first map and you only do 2 incursions. Then after that, you keep going in, you do 3, and then in your 4th temple, you get up to 11 incursions done, and you use an Incursion Scarab of Timelines on that. Then on your 12th one, you go into a new map, and you use a new Incursion Scarab of Timelines. So that's something you could use. Timo's pointing out that you could use it with an adjacent upgrade room, and that's true, but you just don't have that much agency over whether you've got the Temple Nexus room or not. I don't think you've got that much control over it. So that's gonna be tricky. For the rooms that have no upgrades yet, so the ones that are a tier 0 room, like I think it's called, I think there's like doorways or something like that. Those zones I expect will just stay the same. Their tier is still going to be 0 because they'll stay as the same room as they are, and they only exist as tier 0 rooms. So, we made a little bit of a mistake. We talked about the Shrine Buff scenario granting additional experience and how exciting that was. We talked about how Domination Scarabs are good for doing a bunch of stuff. We went and designed a potential Atlas that you could use. And I completely forgot, Shrines in area are guarded by an additional map boss. This is crazy. Modifiers to the final map boss also apply to these Guardians. So, this is going to be something else that has tremendous synergy with everything we were talking about here. Essentially, you want an Atlas exactly like what you see here. You want to be running tier 14 plus, and you don't actually care about the mods that are on the map, because it's going to be, like, what I mean by that, by the mods on the map, it means you could actually do this on a scour and go strategy. Scour and go always feels filthy, but it would work. You get 6 additional shrines by using 3 of these. You also use Domination on the map device. You've got 9 shrines. You have 1 by default because of Supplication. You're at 10. You've got an RNG chance of getting an 11th. And then you've got this craziness on top of that. Essentially, it's 10 more map bosses you get to fight, all of which have a 6% chance to give you a Shaper Guardian map, 6% to give you an Elder Guardian map, 4% to give you a Synthesized map, 4% to give you a Conqueror of the Atlas map, and also potentially 5% chance to give an adjacent map. So many things. This is going to be one of those map generating strategies that's really, really crazy there. And this is also going to take a while. So, that is the setup that we've got here that is really potentially quite bonkers, actually. And I think that could be a lot of fun to go with. Next up, we went through the Incursion Scarabs then, because we made that mistake with the Domination Scarabs. We have the Betrayal Scarabs next. And yeah, this would be something, like, actually, this strategy could potentially give you more 16s. Not this strategy. Could potentially give you more 17s. We've got to work that out. Betrayal Scarabs are next. Contains Jun. That's pretty simple. You can get a 100% chance to get Jun on every map anyway, and you probably get that if you're running an Atlas that's around Betrayal. So based on that, this is more, I want to experiment with Jun and I don't want to commit. That's when you use Betrayal Scarabs. Betrayal Scarab of Intelligence. 150% increased intelligence gained from Immortal Syndicate targets encountered in area. I don't think this is all that hot. Yeah, I'm not really sold on this. Mostly because you tend to want to be working on the tiers as well. Like, it's not like you're always just going interrogate. And also, if you're looking to chase intelligence, you've got the node in the northeast area of the tree that grants you 10 intelligence to a random safe house every time that you finish it. Based on that, I am generally not sold on this one. We'll have to try it out. Betrayal Scarab of Reinforcements. Immortal Syndicate members in area have a 50% increased chance to be accompanied by reinforcements. Now, the wording here is important. 50% increased chance does not mean goes from 20% to 70%. It means goes from 20% to 30%. So, based on that, I don't think this is phenomenal. You get reinforcements a lot anyway by RNG, and there's also limitations. You can only get reinforcements of 3 types. You can have, if you pull in someone, there's a fairly high chance they'll pull in up to 1 person they're allied with, a fairly high chance they'll pull in up to 1 person they're an enemy with, and a very low chance that they'll pull in the team leader that they're serving under in that safe house. So, with that in mind, I kind of feel like you pretty much always, once you're established in Betrayal, will be pulling in people a lot. I don't think that much of this Scarab. I don't think much of this, personally. I think that the strategy for Jun is still, so far, is going to be to focus upon the... Oh, hang on, what were these Scarabs again? Oh, the final map boss has 25% chance to drop a Scarab. Yeah, that's cool. Where's the Betrayal cluster moved to now? Is that it there? Betrayal. Intelligence Gathering. Completing your maps grants a 10 intelligence for a random Immortal Syndicate safe house. You actually take this on an Atlas, similar to what we're talking about here. That will get you to Katarina quite often. Not as often as if you do every single Betrayal encounter in detail, but you'll get to fight her often, and you'll do so pretty cheaply. Next, defeated Immortal Syndicate targets in area have 50% chance to drop an additional Scarab. You can definitely defeat 10 Immortal Syndicate targets in an area. More realistic is to defeat 7 or 8. So if you're throwing in 2 of these, let's say that you get 9. If you throw in 2 of these, you're essentially trading in 2 of a top tier Scarab for 9 random Scarabs. That's not great. I don't think this feels like a winged Scarab. This feels like a gilded Scarab to me. So all of that in mind, I think the best bet is to run the Jun. I think the best bet is going to be to run the intelligence gathering and just run Betrayal without Scarabs, honestly. For Scarabs that aren't very useful, you can trade them away or you can use the 3-for-1 vendor recipe. So turn in any 3 Scarabs, receive back a random Scarab that does not match any of the inputs you used. So the same as the Catalyst recipe. And that's in the patch notes. That's actually something that doesn't exist in the game now, but it's in the patch notes as being added. That Scarab recipe. Okay, so from the disappointment of Betrayal to the craziness that is Blight, this is going to require some investigation to go with it. I need to go to the PathOfExile site and get the item filter information. And the reason we need that is that we need the tiers of the maps. What we need is, down the bottom, map tiers. Tier 16, Plateau, not very blight friendly. Lava Chamber, moderately blight friendly, not amazing. Thicket is probably amazing. Has anyone got enough blight experience to know if Thicket map is amazing for in-map blight events? Or if it's just serviceable. Castle Ruins will be terrible. Plateau will be terrible. Phone died, so you had to turn on the PC. Ouch. Just looking at the 15s now. Underground River, Cold River, Arena, Port, Vault. Nothing there jumps out as a good layout for it. Maze would be an extraordinary layout for Blight. It's a horrible layout for a map, but it's an extraordinary one for Blight. Defiled Cathedral is not a great layout, but it does have great divination cards. And then we got Flooded Mine, would be an A tier one. So Thicket is sharp, but the corners are too sharp, are they? Oh, they're great. Okay, so we're getting, most people are saying Thicket is really good. I haven't run Blight in Thicket much. Like, I'm aware that usually square corners are good. Aware that, like, Dungeon would be the ideal map. Dungeon or maybe Cells. Things that have got lots of tight areas. Lava Chamber, I feel, is just not quite tight enough. But if Thicket's good, then that's great. Maze, though, I think might be the way to go. So Maze will be something that you would then use on a tier... Maze would then be something you would use a... You use a Horizon Orb on a natural 14, or you could favorite Maze, as filthy as that feels, you could favorite Maze and then use a 1 Voidstone Atlas. Although I don't think I like a 1 Voidstone Atlas anymore. Maybe you just want to go... Maybe if you're wanting to go Blight, you want to go 12 different favorites and just go 4 Voidstones and just accept that a bunch of your maps aren't the ones you want. At least... You could then go Dungeon. Yeah, you could then take Dungeon as your map. As awful as Dungeon is as a map, you could do that. So, what tier is Waste Pool? That's a question. Yeah, Waste Pool's amazing for Blight, isn't it? Is it around? Am I just not seeing it? Or is it not there? Tier 7. So, yeah. So, Tier 7 means that you need at least 3 Voidstones socketed, but I think you go with 4. I think the meta is probably going to be a 4 Voidstone Atlas for almost everyone. So yeah, you could go max Voidstones on Waste Pool. That has an excellent div card in the Doctor. It's got a bunch of other solid stuff as well. It's one of the best layouts in the game for Blight. The reason I would say Waste Pool over Toxic Sewer is that Toxic Sewer doesn't have the Doctor in it. Waste Pool does. So there's a whole bunch there. So if Thicket's good though as well, there's a couple of options. So lots and lots of things that you can go with there. But whatever the case, there are answers. You can find maps on this atlas that are good. Blight Scarab forces a Blight encounter. This is terrible. There's already an enchant that does this, and no one wants it either. Yeah, basically dumps a tier Scarab. Blight Scarab of Bounty. This is so good because it stacks to 2. I think there's a little bit of this stat on this tree as well. So let's just go with... the word again is what we want to search for, but we want it in the context of Blight. I think there's a bit of that stat that lets you open Blights multiple times. So that's the strong boxes can be opened again, and that was 16%. But is there any of it for Blight? I thought there was. Yeah, where else are we? I don't see any, do I? Okay, so maybe you can only get 40% of it. Unless there's something else that you can see there. So, basically, the reason that this is important is that if you've got a chest that can be opened again, if you've got 40% of this stat, then it actually ends up being more than twice as good as having 20%. Because you open it once, there's a 40% chance that you then get a second try at the chest, but then there's a 16% chance that you get a third try at it, 6.4% of getting a fourth, and so on and so on and so forth. Without running the numbers on it, it ends up being more of an increase than you get from one. So using 2 of these is good. Then we have the Blight Scarab of Oils, which should be pretty good, but here's the big one. Blight Scarab of Blooming. Blight encounters in areas are harder. Tier 14 plus blighted maps found in the area drop as blight ravaged maps instead. Now the reason that you want something that has a brutally tight layout like Waste Pool is because in the Waste Pool map, there's not very many different ways that blights can snake out. However, the game first determines the number of blight lanes that are going to exist, and then after doing that, it then decides how to fit them into the map. And if it can't fit them all, it then doubles up rewards on some of them, and doubles up monsters and rewards on some of them. So, what you're looking at doing here is using a Blight Scarab of Blooming and 2 Blight Scarabs of Bounty, potentially with a Blight Scarab of Oils as well, or maybe something else. And then that's going to give you a reasonably good chance of getting a chest that... Because you always get one chest that has Blight rewards in it, but this strategy of using Waste Pool will give you more chance for that to be more and more and more of those blight rewards in it. And then each blight reward that you get is 85% to be oils, 15% to be blighted maps. If you do get blighted maps, and if they roll at least tier 14, then they get upgraded to blight ravage maps. So that's the setup that's potentially really interesting there. This could allow you to sell bulk amounts of blight ravage maps, or it could allow you to run them yourself. So this is the setup that you could conceivably go with there. I feel like Waste Pool is the way to go, but you can do other things as well. And multiple blights in a map doesn't work because of technical limitations. So yeah, lots of things you can do there. The other thing that's really good here is that the build that I am thinking of league starting is actually something I played in 322, which is a Chieftain... well, it's an Ignite build. I played it originally as more of a Righteous Fire focus because Righteous Fire was better in the build in 322. I'd still be using Righteous Fire, but I would now be running it as a build that is Fire Trap Ignite. Fire Trap becomes this hybrid skill where the initial hit from each trap does damage, and then on top of that, you also have the bad ground that Fire Trap leaves as well. So you've got a whole bunch of things that are causing enemies to get set on fire, and then on top of that, every now and again you get a Hinekora explosion. It ignites monsters near it. Those monsters then get proliferated. Those ignites get proliferated through an entire pack, whether that be through Beric's Respite or through the other methods, the Searing Exarch implicit on gloves. There's lots of ways of doing it, but you can then spread that fire through an entire lane in Blight. This build is absolutely incredible at Blight maps, and especially Blight Ravaged ones, and it can't AFK them, but it's close. So lots and lots of stuff that you can do there. Crazy, crazy stuff. And yeah, also people are talking about the oil extractors as well. I'm sort of forgetting the anointed jewelry and the oil extractors. But that's another axis of currency generation. You've got the Blight Scarab of Oils as an axis of currency generation. And again, this has lots of synergy with forcing more Blight rewards, which is what the Waste Pool strategy does. So that's the Blight outline. That's essentially one of those strategies where your entire Atlas is kind of dedicated to one thing. So I don't know what you're going to do with the rest of your Atlas. You're basically focused on that Blight event. Everything else that's in the map is just a small bonus if you do it. Smart Rise is asking how would the Chieftain starter setup work for the Shrine Focused Destructive Play thing that we discussed before. I think it's pretty good for it. It's not going to be the best map boss destroyer in the world, but it will kill them fast. And it's not going to die to them either. Guide for the build is something people are asking for. I'll give you the out-of-date one. I'll give you the out-of-date one from 3.22. This is not going to be something that you can use exactly as is, but it is going to be a pretty good starting point for it. I just got to find that. It might be... How far back is 322? It's probably a couple of pages. Let's go... not the first page. Sorry, not on the second page. I will just check the first page just in case. No, not on the second page. I'll go to the third page. Okay, here we are. Found it. All right. This is the 322 version of the build. So I hope that worked. Yeah, there it is. That's the 322 version of the build. Don't use that exactly as it is, but it is a starting point to the sort of things you can expect from it. It's actually going to be more viable than it used to be because all of the 323 changes that stuffed it around, one of the biggest ones was losing the tattoos, and they're back. They're worse than they were, but they're pretty good. Just on the heist, actually, something that's come up a bit is discussion of heist in general here. Heist has no Scarabs. It loses a good sextant and a clunky sextant. So that feels like it feels like a nerf, but there's a couple of things going for it. Firstly, Heist picks up the fact that there is this perception of it being nerfed. That always helps. If the more that people in the community think something is nerfed, actually the more the market overreacts to that perception of a nerf, and that can drive people away from playing it, which then makes it more profitable to play. That's the first thing. The second thing is that Heist is dropping to 5C on the map device. The third thing is you no longer need to invest like 12, 14 wasted points in 7th Gate. And the fourth thing is that we might have level 84 Heist content as well. We don't know about that yet. So that's something that we'll find out about. There's also a fifth thing, which is the potential, and this is unknown as yet, for the Horned Scarab of Awakening might have an Uber Heist craft, but that we don't know. Anyways, that's Blight. Let's move on to the question of Breach next. Breach, we have the standard Breach Scarabs are really good now. +2 breaches, and because this adds your first breach to the map, it also triggers a chance for, I think it's Eve of Destruction that it is, the node that can be good. That gets turned on by this as well. So base Breach Scarabs, really good because you can stack 4 of them. And if you do stack 4 of them, wow, you're going to get a lot of breaches. But then we have the more interesting ones. Breaches in area always belong to Chayula. This is a very powerful old sextant that's being rolled into a Scarab now. And this is something that's interesting in that there's no Ulna Toll version of this. Now, normally, Chayula is the more special of them, but Ulna Toll is needed in order to do the hidden invitations. I think we may see a meta develop where actually Ulna Toll ones become the most expensive. Although we'll have to find out how that actually plays out. Breaches in area contain a Breach Lord. This is alright. This is probably not as good as some people think it is, but it is good. The Breach Lords take a bit of time to focus down, and that can often cause you to miss out on 1 or 2 of the hands. The hands are really important in Breach. So do keep that in mind. There's an opportunity cost to fighting a Breach Lord, but it is still beneficial to have it, and it's probably better than just throwing another 2 breaches on, but it's not monstrously better. I wouldn't fault anyone. If you think there's any chance that you'll fail to kill a Breach Lord, then in that case, just use more of these. Breach Scarab of Splintering, 50% more Breach Splinters from Breach monsters in area and from clasped hands in area. These are really good. I think you probably want to use 3 of these and 1 of these in general, or you just use 4 of these. And finally, we've got the top tier one, which is breaches in area have 5 to 10 additional clasped hands. This is crazy. This is just going to disgorge a monstrous amount of monsters and a monstrous amount of loot. Clasped hands are a really big deal in Breach. So lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of stuff. And this should be affected by the changes that were made to Breach hands opening automatically. So, like, if you get 5 to 10 additional clasped hands on a bunch of different breaches, this is really nuts. You'll definitely only use this in conjunction with Breach Scarab of the Dreamer, unless Chayula stones start becoming cheap, and that may well happen. But Chayula has the best items too. So, yeah. Ulnatol is definitely going to be the one that's the most expensive of the breaches. The more that I look at this, the more clear I become. Ulnatol is going to be the most important of them. And, okay, so yeah, Breach is going to be pretty explosive. I do think the Breach Scarab of Snares could be quite expensive. It could see this being something that... I feel like this is going to be profitable to run even if the Scarab costs 60 Chaos. Maybe even if it costs 70 or 80. I can see this being profitable to run at that cost. And that's one of the things you always want to be thinking with the better Scarabs. What price point do they stop being profitable to run? Because that is somewhat of a soft cap on how high they can rise. And yeah. Breach, though, looks really good. Do we want to... I'm thinking in terms of things you might compile with it on the Atlas. It wants a lot of attention on your maps. Breach wants you to throw a lot of Scarabs at it, and that makes me think that again you might want to consider pairing this with Heist and one of the classic influence, one of the 3 main influence types. So either you take the destructive play package that we outlined for this Atlas, or you take one of the other, or you take all the Searing Exarch nodes, or you take all the Eater of Worlds nodes. Of note, there was a buff that was given to the Eater of Worlds influence pack size nodes up the top here, and also the same ones for the Searing Exarch. You definitely want to take those now. Cartography Scarabs are crazy as well. So that's all the Breach stuff. Breach looks really good. These things are crazy. 50% increased maps found in area that you can stack 2 of is a big deal. So that's already a winged Cartography Scarab from the current game, I think. Just from having 2 of the default low tier version. But it's the higher tier ones that are more impressive. Maps found in the area are a tier higher up to 16. And there was a question earlier about Harbinger Orbs. I think they're going to get this text as well. Grinding Gear Games seem to be pretty set on us being able to only get tier 17 maps by finding them. So this is definitely going to be something that will be pushing you up to 16. This feels like one of those Scarabs you're going to want to use early in progression because it will be explosive when you get it. You might hit a point where you're doing your first tier 11 map and you've had one of these drop and you're like, right, this tier 11, this went 8 mod when I vialed it. What I'm going to do is I'm going to throw it in with this Cartography Scarab of Ascension with these 2, and I'm going to build an early red map pool that will get me through to reaching tier 16s. And then at that point, you'll start just hitting a point where you never run out of maps again. There are no Necropolis Scarabs, that's correct. Because they don't want Necropolis Scarabs existing in League, because then they would exist in Standard from hardcore characters ripping over. And that would be something that's a bit messy. And that's a good point that BWS Soldier is saying there, that this does mean that tier 15s can upgrade to 16s, then get the 16 to 17 upgrade proc. So that can happen by RNG as well. A unique map will drop from the final map boss. So this is essentially a worse version of the divination card that gives you a random unique map, unless there's something strange going on with this. The reason it's worse is that it takes up a Scarab slot. This is something that I feel you use on a low tier map, unless you need to do otherwise. It's worse than a Kirak singular scouting report in most situations. Unless you can get maps that you might not expect. One of the key things to note is that when you're clearing out your Atlas, there are 3 unique maps that are quite rare. These are Coward's Trial, Twilight Temple, and what's the other one? The Divination card one, Putrid Cloister. These 3 are tier 3 rarity, the same rarity as Cold Iron Point, whereas most of the others are tier 4, same as Goldrum, or tier 5, the same as Chevron's Pace. So basically, Coward's Trial is like 5 to 7 times rarer than something like Malkoon. So a lot of your focus early on is trying to get those 3 rare maps done, and Kirak's scouting missions are just so much better for that than this. So, oh, of course, this can also proc on all the bosses being added by Scarabs. That's a very good point. Yeah, so we're going to think on that one. That's... With moving up the stakes and with other shenanigans, this could be better than I'm giving it credit for. There's that Shrine one. This has tremendous synergies with that Shrine one as well. So in that case, yeah, I was wrong about that. My first thought was that this was not very useful. That was wrong. It does have a use. And that's one of the good things about doing this on a stream. If I had done this on a pre-recorded video, I would have been saying it was bad and no one would have been there to correct me. Putrid Cloister, Coward's Trial, and Twilight Temple is the other rare one. Twilight Temple is definitely... You'll feel that if you ever play in solo self-found. You'll feel like it's really hard to get. The final map boss wording is actually exactly what the Maven's Destructive Play talks about. Modifiers to the final map boss in each map also apply to these. The reason they use that final map boss wording is that it does not apply to twinned copies. That's the reason that they have that wording in there. Anyway, that's the Cartography Scarab of Singularity. Then we have Cartography Scarab of Corruption. This thing's really good. It replaces a very, very popular, very, very good sextant mod, and now it's a Scarab instead. Non-unique maps found in the area are corrupted and have 8 modifiers. So that's going to be something that will provide you with ways of farming a lot of 8-mod maps, but of course you're going to need to get this particular Scarab, which is probably going to be pretty rare. It was, this sextant was 20 times rarer than the most common sextants in the past, so it's definitely not something that I expect to be super common. But even if this is 20 times rarer than, say, a baseline Breach Scarab, I don't think that makes it stupidly rare, just a bit uncommon. Next we have the Cartography Scarab of Duplication, which grants a 30% chance for duplication, and interestingly, this has a limit of 2. Now, I feel like this is something that is at its best when you are really stacking this with a lot of other things that are adding more maps, and when you're doing ultra juiced content with a view to trying to print tier 17s and also trying to print all of these Atlas mini boss maps that this strategy is so good with. Ultimately, I think the price of this in Trade League will be dictated by people who are playing a strategy based around map bosses and Maven, just basically forcing more final map bosses onto the map, and then using everything that stacks with that. So that's the Cartography Scarabs. I don't think that these justify their own Atlas. They're something that supplements other Atlases and that addresses at various points. It is worth noting that one of the Delirium Scarabs is basically a Cartography Scarab as well, when we get to that. Ambush. 5 additional strongboxes, limit 4. This is just bonkers. And of course, the flavor text, is it still an ambush if you're expecting it? This is the reason that they nerfed strongboxes so much on the passive tree. They removed the operative strongbox. It's because of this. It allows them to do this because they got rid of the operative box. I think that's the intention there. Ambush Scarab of Hidden Compartments. 15% chance for strongboxes in area to be openable again. This stacks extremely favorably with the same mod when it's found on the Atlas passive tree, because again, there's that chance that once it's been opened once, it then just... But there's escalating returns on this. The higher you can get this stat, the more times you get to open each chest on average, and it's super linear scaling. So this is quite good, but it's something that obviously just goes on a generic ambush sort of passive tree. Ambush Scarab of Potency, though, is really interesting. 75% increased effect of explicit modifiers on strongboxes in area. This is, like, not usually good, but there will definitely be some strongbox mods that are really good, and this will be something people will roll a lot, I think. And people are going to mess around with it and roll it a lot. And I really agree with Black Omega's point in chat. I might just quickly interrupt this to reinforce that point, that if you are overwhelmed, pick one or two things and learn everything about them. Because here, I'm going through all of these things. I don't expect that most people that are watching this stream, even people that watch the whole stream, whether it be as it's happening or that watch the VOD of it later, I don't think most of you are going to listen to this and then go, right, I'm going to then try every single one of these Scarabs out in this league. Instead, what you're going to do is pick a couple of them that really sound interesting and then learn more about them. You want to know more than I do about some one or two sections of the game, and then you're in a position where you can make a lot of currency out of that. That's the general goal you've got there. Ambush. Also, I just mentioned in chat, people are talking about the transmuted version of Elemental Hit. The reason I quite like this, I'm not sold on it yet. The reason I think it could be interesting, this is the one that deals all 3 element damages at once, but it's about a third as much damage of each. The reason I think it has at least some potential, is that it's just easier to gear for, because all you need is a tri-element bow or a tri-element wand. You don't need to have some of the weirdest stuff you need for Elemental Hit normally, when you're going, at least if you're focusing on one element. I feel like it just scales better with your weapon. I've got to look more into that though. That's my first thought. Next we have that's the Ambush Scarab of Potency. Really interesting one. I can't think of any strongbox mods that are really obviously good with it, but I'm sure I'm missing something. Strongboxes in area are more likely to be rarer variant. Oh, hang on, we just jumped over one. Area contains many additional strongboxes, and the area's inhabitants are lying in ambush. Now, this is the old Monstrous Treasure Craft, or at least it's something akin to the Monstrous Treasure Craft, but, very important, you can no longer get this in conjunction with 500% increased quantity, and strongbox monsters are enraged, or 600% if you got the Maven version of it. So, this is a lot weaker than the existing Monstrous Treasure Craft. What this is it captures the gameplay of Monstrous Treasure, but without the explosive scaling of it, so that people that want to play it for fun, they can afford to buy this. People who are just looking for the maximum value per map that they can get, they're not going to be interested in this. But this is a fun side event, and I reckon it's worth doing 2 or 3 times. Just play an Ambush Scarab of Containment and just explore what the game feels like when you're playing a very different form of strongboxes. Also, this definitely synergizes really well with the hidden compartments and similar stats on the passive tree. And you probably also use it with the, not the potency, but the discernment. So now we have the Ambush Scarab of Discernment, which makes it more likely to get rarer varieties of strongboxes. Strongboxes haven't aged very well. There's Diviner's strongboxes, which used to be really exciting. Cartographer's strongboxes used to be really exciting and may actually have a use still. We'll come back to them in a sec. There's Currency strongboxes, and then all the rest of them are pretty bad. And that includes some of the rarer types are pretty bad as well. Like, the Ornate strongbox is not the most common thing in the world, but it's also not very good. The Artisan strongbox, I think it is, the one that drops a whole bunch of quality modifying currency, is really bad, but I think that's uncommon. So based on that, this is going to mean that you do receive more of the rarer currency ones, and particularly the Cartographer's box, which is the one that I think is more interesting to talk about here. Ambush Scarab of Discernment might end up, if the bias on this is large enough, it might mean that Cartographer's Scarabs start appearing in every map if you use it in conjunction with the Containment one. And Cartographer's Scarabs might have some use... Cartographer's boxes might have some use in this world where tier 16s can upgrade to tier 17s. So, that's an option you've got there. You could definitely do something here with these strong boxes and get something to happen. But I'm not sold on the ambush support on the Scarabs here. It's definitely worse than the old Sextants, but I do think one of the advantages of it being worse is that Ambush Scarab of Containment is something you can actually just frivolously use. You don't have to hoard the Monstrous Treasure Crafts to use them and only use them in the best possible way. Instead, you can go, you know what, that looks like fun. Now I'll buy one for 25C and I'll try it and see how it goes. That's interesting. Ban City is saying that Mark was talking about a change to Engineer's Orbs, which I missed. Infused Engineer's Orbs, which were added in Harvest, were really interesting. They didn't stick around, except that their rewards were moved to the Eternal Labyrinth of Tribute. So the Eternal Labyrinth of Tribute, the Silver Key Chests, the End Chests, they are basically a strongbox that's been augmented by an Infused Engineer's Orb. And they'll have things like an entire stack of divination cards. So if the game rolls that this chest is going to be a Diviner's Strongbox version, then it will also add in a full set of div cards. If it rolls that it is going to be an armor chest, it will throw in a 6-link. So there's all these sorts of things. But the main reason people run the Tribute Lab is for the Grand Spectrum jewels, if they run it at all, depending on how much demand there is for those. And really the Infused Engineer's Orb effect on the lab chests sort of gets missed. It is there, and it's appreciated, but it's not something people are that aware of. I wouldn't mind them having... Oh, they just said they want to remove them, do they? I feel like the Infused Engineer's Orbs were cool because they were rare. Because they were rare, GGG could say, all right, we're going to make these pretty special, but the baseline ones are just rubbish. They shouldn't exist. Expedition is next. So firstly, you can just force an Expedition encounter. You can do this with the passive tree as well. And I feel like Expedition support on the passive tree is so good that you are going to flood your passive tree with it instead. And you're not going to use this Scarab. Expedition Scarab of Rune Finding. This one's nuts. You want 2 of these. It's crazy. Expedition encounters have 200% with 2 of these. Increased number of runic monster markers. This is just bonkers. This is where all of the logbooks come from. So this is not quite 200% more because you can get some of that stat otherwise. Let's just bring it up. Runic monsters, you've got 20% increase. And yeah, so you're going from 120% of base to 320% of base with this, which is a 166% more multiplier to the amount of runic monsters that you're getting. That is just crazy. That's 167% more logbooks when you use 2 of these. Yeah, really, really, really good. Expedition Scarab of Verisium Powder. This was mentioned in yesterday's video as well. Expedition encounters in area have 20% increased number of explosives and 80% increased explosive radius. This is really good if you're not using the nuke. If you're using the nuke, then this is marginal. You probably don't want to waste a Scarab on it. You're just using 2 of these. Expedition Scarab of the Scald causes Danig to be the leader. Danig is strictly better than the other 3. So I find that in my personal experience, Rog is better than Tujen, but not by much. And Tujen is better than Gwenin by miles. Most people dispute that, and they put Tujen ahead of Rog by quite a bit, then Rog ahead of Gwenin by an enormous amount. Whatever the case, though, whatever your ordering of those 3, Danig is strictly better because anything that you get that is a Danig artifact can basically be traded 1-for-1 with benefits for the same artifacts from the Expedition side that you want. So this is really good. The question is whether it's so good that you necessarily want to take it, especially given that there's a cluster in the passive tree that lets you deprioritize the amount of Gwenin that you get. So as long as you don't take Lucky Guess, which you never would, you can go just for these ones, or you can pick up Scratching Up the Ground as well, or you can go, if you don't like Rog that much, you can go Noble Quest and Scratching Up the Ground. But I usually take the right-hand side of this. And then at that point, Danig has a moderate chance of showing up anyway. I think by default, it's 2 to Gwenin, 2 to Tujen, 2 to Rog, 1 to Danig by default. Then if you take a little bit of spec into it, it's 165 to Danig, 380 to Rog, and let's just say you don't touch the other 2, 200, 200. It is an upgrade. I'm just not sure that it's worth a Scarab and a rare Scarab at that. So, who knows? Next, we have the Expedition Scarab of Archaeology. This is when you want to go all in and make the expedition extremely lucrative and extremely dangerous. The real problem with this is that it has bad synergies with the Expedition Nuke. You could conceivably get 4 or even 5 elemental immunities with this. With 5 elemental immunities, that just makes the expedition impossible to complete. So you have to read things if you're using this, and a lot of people don't like reading things. Everyone that doesn't like reading things is going to hate this Scarab, or they're going to end up getting burnt by it a few times and complaining about it a lot. The reason for this, though, that the suffixes from memory are upsides and the prefixes are downside. Maybe it's the other way around. But just getting 2 more of each is a lot. And ultimately, I'm inclined to go 2 Scarabs of Rune Finding, 1 of Archaeology, and then maybe 1 for a different mechanic. Honestly, maybe Beyond. Beyond would be crazy there. The thing with Rog versus the crafting of this new league, Rog's role is that he creates finished, mediocre to good items that are definitely beatable, but that aren't beatable cheaply. Rog will create a lot of items that will sell for 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divines, and also will create a mountain of items that will sell for 50 chaos. And it's usually my experience that if you're early in a league, you can get it's pretty easy to make a couple of mirror shards a day off just doing Rog books. Whereas Tujen feels like there's a lot more trading involved with other... There's more time spent pricing items with Rog, and there's more time thinking. With Tujen, you end up with a bunch of stuff that you might not ever get around to selling. But if you do sell it, yeah, you'll make a bunch of currency out of him. He is good, but Rog just feels like he has better jackpots, and it's much more common. Like, you're not getting 10 chaos at a time. You're getting genuinely bigger things. So yeah, Irma's pointing out that with the expedition thing, you could get a lot more XP with this as well. You could also get a lot more item rarity. I'm kind of curious if you could do this in lower tier maps on a character that deals omni damage. So you're dealing all 5 types of damage, which can be done with Rebuke of the Vaal. It doesn't scale that well, but you don't need to scale as well then. You're doing omni damage, so unless you get all 5 immunities, you can eventually burn things down. And you then do this in tier 8s, and then there's a huge amount of rarity. I don't know, maybe it works, maybe it doesn't. And so there's lots of stuff there. You will definitely get some difficult encounters with this. Like, you got to be crazy strong, because there's a bunch of other mechanics that can come up. One key thing is that there is an attack mastery that lets you penetrate block. That is really important. Like, your build, you probably want to be an attack-based build that penetrates block with this setup. And Rog's level, for those of you, there's a bit of discussion in chat about Rog in general. Rog's item levels hard cap at 86, and he is banned from offering you item level 86 stuff until you're level 90 plus. But he can offer you 85 plus, I think, from when you're 86, maybe 85. So there's some slots where 86 is important. It's a big jump up from 85. For those slots, you probably want to be 90, but it doesn't mean that you can't craft an exceptional starting point. But for most spots, 85 is enough, and that means you can be character level 85. Legion is next. Let's jump down to Legion. +1 Legion encounter. This stacks. You can get 4 of them, so that's kind of really solid. Legions in factions in area have 5 additional sergeants. Is a lot. Like, sergeants are a big deal. If we go, this is limited to 1. But the sergeants are the ones that you feel like they're where the loot's coming from. So there's the warhordes as well. Warhordes are really good, but it's the... Legion, everything sort of starts flowing together, but it is... Where is it? The one that really makes everything start feeling good. Down here we've got the... Timeless Conflict, the one that most people don't want. It's like when you get the chain of command, things start to feel a bit better. Like that's where Legion starts to feel like it's a worthwhile mechanic to have. You can get a lot of chance of Legions, which is good because Legion, because it's a stacking mechanic, it's more relevant to have these +1 encounters per Scarab. And yeah, there should be. I feel like this is a really solid. I feel like this is a really solid option here. Legion Scarab of Command. This is terrible. Legion factions in an area are accompanied by a general. The generals don't drop very much loot, and they are much rippier because they're really tanky, and they tend to just occasionally get... Like, they'll have a nasty interaction with a rare sometimes. Like, you might have a Legion bosses that have a quite telegraph slam, and at the same time you've got a rare that's inflicting grasping vines on you or something like that. So, yeah, I think this one is actively terrible. Legion Scarab of the Sekma is incredible. Legion encounters in areas always contain Maraketh faction. Maraketh is the rarest. It also has the highest minimum level, but it is the rarest even at level 16 now. I don't think it always was. I think in Legion League itself, once you got to tier 16, they were all equal chance, but that doesn't seem to be the case now. Next, we've got the Legion Scarab of Eternal Conflict, which allows monsters to be broken out of stasis multiple times. There's a bunch of things in here that kind of keep this under control a little bit, but this one's really potentially busted, and we've got to play around with this, but I think this could be really, really sketchy. Deshowan's asking in chat about Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing. The gem numbers that were revealed are so much worse than what was originally spoiled. It drinks 8 charges of your flask instead of the originally announced 6. It's less scaling with life of the flask. I just don't think it's there. I hope I'm wrong, but my first thoughts on Poisonous Concoction of Bouncing are that you bounce away from it. And so, yeah, I think that this is potentially explosive. Like this with Headhunter in particular is like this really is a Scarab that breaks Headhunter. Headhunter sort of breaks itself as well, but I think this is really, really sketchy. But really, really strong. It's a good question. How will this interact with minion AI? I think they will keep trying to attack the same monster unless there's a break. Like unless it disappears for 150 milliseconds and returns. There is going to be diminishing returns on this. Diminishing returns will be in the form of the monsters becoming tankier every time they're broken out, and we'll have to see exactly how that plays out because this could be something that GGG get really wrong. And yeah, Soul Eater's been addressed a little bit. Like it's been nerfed. It's been brought down a little bit in ridiculousness. In terms of things Legion goes well with, I think actually Beyond is another thing. Like there's a lot of synergies with Beyond. And I kind of think that might be something interesting to explore this league, especially with the build that I'm thinking of playing, being a Righteous Fire / Fire Trap Ignite Chieftain. This is something that could potentially have a lot of synergies there. So Beyond, the slaying monsters to close an area attract monsters from beyond this realm. This is something that you get just on the default Scarab. You can get 100% of this stat on the tree now, though. So you can get it every single map. And yeah, I do think the artwork of Scarab reflects the drop rates rather than dictating them. Beyond Scarab of Hemophilia causes beyond portals in the area to have increased merging radius, and you can stack 2 of these. Merging radius is a powerful stat, but the more monsters you can force onto a map or in close proximity, the less relevant merging radius becomes. So essentially, this is a Scarab that you want to outgrow. You want to use this when you're getting started, but you do not want to keep using this in your deep end game plan, because eventually you want to try and have so many monsters in the map that you overpower limitations on merging radius. That said, it may make it easier with the potentially very powerful keystone that there is for Beyond, which is Endless Tide. This has 50% less merging radius. And this is something that, by virtue of turning off bosses, what that does is it lets the Beyond encounters go on forever, because they do stop when a boss spawns. Okay, Beyond Scarab of Resurgence. Beyond bosses in area are enraged on low life, and they drop twice as much tainted currency. And they also, the portals have an increased chance to spawn a unique boss. The Beyond portals in area have 30% increased chance to spawn a unique boss is kind of problematic. This means that your Beyond encounters are going to expire quicker, and that's going to mean that less rare monsters, less magic monsters are going to be created by it. I don't like this one very much. I could be wrong. It could be that Tainted Currency is so good that this ends up being okay. So I'm not going to rule out that this could ever be used. I just am not keen to jump into using this. Beyond Scarab of Corruption, I think, is just trash. Items dropped by Beyond Demons in area are corrupted. Now, it used to be that corrupted rare items would be identified, and so you would sometimes get a decent item from that. That's gone. What you will get from this is more 6 links, but 6 links are only 20 fusings. So early in the league, that's going to be worthwhile, because when you Vaal an item, if you Vaal something that has the potential to be 6 sockets, 6 links, the chances of getting it being 6 linked are actually pretty high. It's like 1 in 144. This was something GGG actually mentioned a while ago. They don't normally talk about drop rates now, but when Vaal Orbs were new, they mentioned that it's an equal weighting between getting 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 sockets, and also between 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 links as the first link on a corrupted item. So with the Vaal Orb, it's 1 in 4 to scramble the item, and then it's 1 in 6 to get 6 sockets, 1 in 6 to get 6 link once you've got 6 sockets. So all in all, 1 in 144 for you to get a 6 link. Every time one of these items drops that is a two-handed weapon or that is a body armor. So that's the utility of this. You definitely don't want this in conjunction with a Beyond boss. You want the Beyond bosses not to spawn if you're doing this strategy. And so, yeah, that's your sort of option if you do want to use this Scarab. I am not sold on it at all. Then finally, Beyond unique monsters slain in the area create 8 to 12 additional Beyond portals. Okay, this is the crazy one. There's a bunch of things that cause more unique monsters to spawn, and the best of them is Ritual. Like, the best of them is Ritual here. You can get a whole bunch of additional unique monsters in a tightly bunched together area, and then you can use that with Beyond Scarab of the Invasion to create a tremendous amount of Beyond portals, and thus a tremendous amount of additional Beyond magic and rare monsters, all concentrated into one spot. You absolutely have to use this in conjunction with the Beyond Keystone, Endless Tide. Otherwise, it's complete trash. All it's doing is just getting you to the end of the Beyond encounter faster. But I think this one could be really, really interesting here. Rogue Exiles are another one. You can get a lot of Rogue Exiles onto a map. And but I do think it is Ritual that's the god tier thing here. So what you'd be looking to do is bundle up Ritual vessels, blood vessels that have a lot of unique monsters in them. And then you'd be setting off Beyond Scarab of the Invasion on a rightly set up Atlas passive tree. It could be ridiculous. Do Beyond monsters give Ritual tribute? I believe they do, yes. Beyond and Exiles, I think it's Beyond Ritual Exiles is the tree you'd use. So let's just put together a tree that would work for this. So this is our tree that we were playing around with before. I've got 2 copies of it, so I can crangle one of them. So the way we'll do that to do the crangling is just to go delete everything, start all over again, and now let's start with Beyond. So Beyond. Let's click everything to start with, then we want to go what we don't want. We do want the Endless Tide. Down here, we have Finish Opulence is good, yes. Demonic Power is on defeating a Beyond boss. No, we don't want that. We do want that, though. Beyond Portals have an increased merging radius. Increased merging radius is a useful stat. It's just not something I'm going to go crazy for. I'm not going to waste a Scarab slot on it, but I will use it when I've got it for minimal cost. Increased chance to spawn a unique boss. No, we do not want that mod. Beyond Portal, yes. Hang on. Yeah, we can get that here. So yeah, that's what we want up there. And then up here we don't want everything here. We want just some of this. I just don't know which ones we want here. It's probably, we do want all the small nodes in this cluster. Okay. Beyond Demons. of Katash and Div card. Katash and Div cards is useful. Basic currency. Maybe we do want all three? Maybe not this one. I feel like that's how we want to go with the Beyond setup. So, in any case, that's our starting point for Beyond. Now, next we have Ritual. So let's just spec everything for Ritual and then reassess. What do we need to do? Deferring costs less. Yeah, that's the better side. Ritual, we've got Monster Sacrifice, more tribute. Altars of Special Rewards is good, yes. But we also want this, don't we? No, actually 5% more tribute is just not that important. Then what else do we have down here? Ritual. This cluster was the Blood-Filled Vessel one. We'll take it. It's not amazing, but that's fine. That's got a good stat on it. This one here is a bit weird, wasn't it? Or was it not? Now, the only thing that's weird is Arbitrary Tenets. Do we want everything here? No, we don't really care about the travel node. That is a genuine travel node there. Then down here, we've got Ritual Chance. I feel like this is a starting point. This is what Beyond and Rituals looks like. Then we probably want Rogue Exiles, don't we? Rogue Exiles. Let's just spec all the Exiles. And like, this feels like a starting point for a tree. Not necessarily optimized or anything, but this is a starting point for a tree that's based around a Beyond Scarab of the Invasion. And then I'm just thinking if there's anything else you want to go with there. Did I make sure that I add the... I forgot to actually take the Beyond Keystone. That's important. So the appeal here with the Ritual is actually just that it allows you to force a tremendous amount of additional uniques onto a map. When you bring in a Ritual Vessel that's got, like, you're not going to be using... This is not a 4 Scarab setup. This is a 1 Scarab and 3 Ritual Vessel setup. And those 3 Ritual Vessels will be from the map boss of Glacier map, or something else that gives you just a lot of unique monsters in one box. Oh yeah, you don't need Ritual Chance, do you? Whatever the case, Amit, thanks, Gone, thanks for pointing that out, that's not useful, but I think it's just like... All we're looking at here is just a broad strokes. Here's a way you could build around it. I'm not going to advocate this. It's more that this is an experiment you could carry out. Yeah, we need 10 map slots now. It does definitely feel like we're going to have this world where we're going to have... like, we potentially could have more Scarabs than we know what to do with. Ultimatum is next. Ultimatum Encounter is very easily organized on the tree and not all that exciting, except for one thing, and that is that this seems to add... Like, having the Trial Master present in a zone seems to add a percentage chance for inscribed ultimatums to drop. That was useful in 323 for a challenge. Ultimatum Scarab of Bribing. Increased XP, you can stack 2 of these, and you get the rewards as though you completed 2 additional rounds. This feels like it's really good. Like, if you get 2 of these, this could be really solid. And then we have the Ultimatum Scarab of Dueling, which causes the Trial Master to be present. This will be really popular in tier 14 easy maps. I think that'll be where it'll be used. People will throw this into a tier 14 map, go and fight the Trial Master, get his loot. This could be very rare, but the image doesn't look like it. All you want, though, the only reason you've got this is because you want to get the Trial Master loot. So basically, you're fishing for a Hateforge. This is like a chance at Hateforge. Ultimatum Scarab of Catalyzing is explosive. Ultimatums in area only offer catalysts as rewards, and you're going to get a lot of them from this. And that will that will be really strong. And then you've got the Ultimatum Scarab of Inscription, which is also known is extremely strong synergy with the Ultimatum Scarab of Catalysts. Big question is going to be whether inscribed ultimatums, whether there's a market for them. If there's a challenge around them, they'll be good. Additionally, Ultimatum possibly could work with Beyond, but I don't think it spawns anywhere near as many monsters as Ritual does. So Ritual's probably where you want to be for that. Harbinger is the other thing, actually. Come to think of it, this tree that we were throwing together here, it probably wants Harbingers as well. I just feel like you take everything, don't you? I feel like you just take everything on Harbinger. And yeah, that improves it. So Harbinger just puts a lot of monsters in one place, which synergizes with everything else we're trying to do with Beyond on that tree. With that silly, over-the-top Beyond Scarab, the one that causes every unique... Oh, although, actually, come to think of it, no, it's not giving you unique monsters. No, I'm wrong. Alright, me need to stop making mistakes like that. I don't want to have Harbinger on the maps. I want to... What else could put more uniques on? Like, destructive play setup? I know. And then we have, yeah. I think the key thing with the inscribed ultimatums will be that it's going to depend how rare the genuinely good ones are, and also if there's a challenge to do them. Because if there's a challenge, they'll be valuable again. Breach instead of Harbinger. Breach doesn't provide unique monsters either. I mean, it might provide one, but it's not providing a lot. I'm just trying to think of league mechanics. Blight gives more. Blight is the one that gives uniques. And just as I'm thinking that, Adrian in chat is also thinking it as well. Yeah, you're right. It's Blight. So let's go with Blight. Let's. Took me a while to think of it, but Blight is definitely the thing that provides the most additional unique monsters. Where is Blight on the tree? You can tell I haven't run Blight in a while. It's moved around since I'm familiar with it. Okay, let's just add in Blight. We've got the points for it. We'll take everything for now because this is not intended to be an optimized tree. This is just a proof of concept. The Shrine Bosses option is something that this tree was designed around the Shrine Bosses. That's something that could be used, but we're kind of full on Scarabs on this setup. Jun is another point. Yeah, Jun is another option. I didn't think of, but I think we'll go Blight because we're just looking for something. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's more just a concept that would work, not something that's been completely refined. Okay, so Delirium. The last Delirium one is my favorite cartography Scarab, except that it's called a Delirium Scarab instead. But let's go through these. Delirium Scarab contains a Mirror of Delirium. Only use this if you're looking to explore Delirium and see if you find it fun, because you can easily get this on the passive tree. Delirium reward meters feel 100% faster in area, stacks to a limit of 2. This was one of the best of the sextant mods, and now you can get better than you used to be able to. This thing is crazy good. Like, this thing is unbelievably strong. As long as it does exactly what it says it does. Being able to use 2 of these, like being able to use 1 of these would have been great. Even if it was capped at 1 and it was 60%, it would have been good. But with 2 of them capped at 100%, it just feels like it's nuts. Next, we've got Delirium Scarab of Paranoia, which is Delirium encounters an area, generate 2 additional reward types, may be taken twice. This is potentially really strong because you're going to get this multiplied a lot of times. And most of the reward types are pretty mediocre, but if you do hit Scarabs, that could be really good. People are pointing out in chat that I should be taking the Scarab cluster that is here on this tree. Yep, you're right. And I should probably take the uncommon Scarabs as well, and that would make a lot of sense. Not so sure about... yeah, that feels like a very obvious choice there, so we'll do that. So 2 additional reward types. If you're getting up to, say, 7 rewards, then this is going to generate a lot of payoff. And if you're getting much past 7, then it's going to be amazing. Because these are going to be your first ones that are added. And so they'll get all the way up. So this one could be really solid. Delirium Scarab of Neuroses. This one disappointed me. It contains all unique Delirium bosses. So this basically is just like... I mean... For a solo self-found player, this is another chance to get a small cluster jewel you care about. In Trade League, though, this is just like 20 simulacrum splinters with awkwardness, because you might have got that boss anyway, and on top of maybe getting that boss anyway, you've actually got to kill them before the mist collapses. They're all really tanky. Kosis is really tanky, or if you're using the permanent mist cluster, then you're not going to get your main reward from them. So I'm really not sold on this one at all. Really, really not sold here. Next, we have the Delirium Scarab of Delusions, which is the one that causes maps found in the area to have layers of delirium. So essentially, this is applying a node from the Atlas. Not that one. They moved it. There it is. Pathological. This is basically giving you pathological on your Atlas. Maps found in your areas have 3% chance to contain layers of delirium, but it's at 100% instead of 4% that you'd get from this cluster. I really like this node, especially when you're talking about like the sorts of numbers of maps you're going to be generating with this, and especially if you're using the Cartography Scarab of Corruption as well. You're going to get 8 mod delirious maps. They're not going to be the perfect layers of delirium, but I do think this is going to be functionally giving you a lot of delirium orbs. Don't know how this works on tier 17 maps. And that's important to note. If a map is tier 16 and becomes delirious, I assume it probably becomes a tier 17 delirious map, but they have said that that's not going to work on corrupted maps, so we don't know. We don't know what's going to happen there. Vash, that has not been answered yet. That's something that is a question I'd like to hear as well. Scarab of Monstrous Lineage is next. 40% increased magic pack size. This is a big deal for XP. This is a big deal for loot. This is just a really good Scarab in general that doesn't fit any other category. And honestly, I think it's really good for a small Scarab, like one that's graphically looks like it could be one of the common Scarabs. That makes it look really interesting because I feel like this is the one you use. If you don't know which Scarab to use, default to using this. So yeah, default to using this. Scarab of Adversaries is area contains 4 additional packs with mirrored rare monsters. Hey, that used to be a sextant. And that should be something that's quite a bit worse than this in most cases, but could be really good if it works in conjunction with the Essence Calcification Scarab. We've got to see what that interaction is. It may or may not work, but if it does work, if it gives you 4 packs that each have multiple rare monsters in them, then that's going to be really crazy with the calcification thing. Next, we've got the Mysterious Scarab. You can use up to 3 of these, and they'll give you clusters of Mysterious Barrels. I've never been impressed with these. I think they have to put them in because I believe this is the drop location of the Divination card for Vile Breach. So Vile Breach drops primarily from level 8, from Uber Breach Lords, but it can also drop from a Divination card, and that Divination card comes from these silly things, I believe. This is not really known. Hosnar is asking for where this is from. I might just copy that in. There you go. That's from the Grinding Gear Games official site. So yeah, I do not like the barrels. Some of them are good, some of them are not, but you can't tell until you're in the map whether you've got the good ones or the bad ones. That's the annoying thing with them. Scarab of Hunted Traitors. Area contains Hunted Traitors. These are monsters that are particularly lucrative. Like, this is just basically general juice, same as the Monstrous Lineage. That's the intended purpose of that. And then we have the funny Scarab of Stability. This is a meme, but it's a cool meme, and people will want it. Portals to area have a 50% chance not to be consumed on use. Now, GGG have confirmed that you are still limited to 6 players in a zone. They have found a way around some of the silliness you could manage. Otherwise, I don't know if it's 6 at a time or if it's 6 ever. So maybe that's something people can try and find out with this. I think this Scarab is a meme, but people will play around with it. It will definitely have uses though on tier 17s, especially when you're learning the fights. So it's not like it's a complete and utter meme. It has uses. It's just that it's not going to be something that you'll use very much. And I don't think it'll be expensive. Early on though, yeah, tier 17s. Maybe you use it in a really messy tier 17. You can't use it with Valdo maps though, which is annoying. So with the barrels, they do contain loot. There's 3 different types of barrels, I believe. Maybe it's 4 or 5 in the game at the moment. One of them contains a lot of loot, but that's the rare one. The other ones, which you mostly get, contain bombs and stuff like that, but they also can drop a div card. So yeah, Scarab of Stability, this is a meme, but it's a cool meme. It's like if Cast on Death was added to the game now. if it had never existed in the past and they were like, let's add this in because it seems like fun. And yeah, I paid for 6 plus 0 to 6 portals. I'm going to use 6 plus 0 to 6 portals. Horn Scarab of Bloodlines is next. This is crazy. In terms of general juice, obviously always used with Scarab of Monstrous Lineage. And this is just going to be a tremendous increase in the amount of generic drop anywhere loot. Horn Scarabs, I think, are going to be very rare in comparison to other Scarabs and very valuable, potentially. Horn Scarab of Nemesis. This one, on the other hand, is disappointing. Rare monsters in areas have 2 additional modifiers. I just, like, this gives them a tremendous amount of health. A tremendous amount of just generic defense. And it doesn't feel like... It feels like it gives them more loot. It definitely gives them more loot, but not monstrously more. From Veldo's maps, you can experience 7 mod rare monsters, and they don't feel rewarding. So, yeah, I don't see a use for this. There's a couple of things that have them, but there's a couple of things that will use them, but I don't see this being very good. Horn Scarab of Preservation protects your other Scarabs, but comes at the opportunity cost of you not being able to put a better Scarab in that slot. I think if you're using the best other Scarabs, the Horn Scarab of Preservation actually loses some of its effectiveness because it's not multiplying the rest of the map. It's more if you've got a strategy that uses a couple of specific Scarabs that are hard to get in bulk, then maybe you'll want these things in some bulk. But yeah, I'm not really sold. I think if one Scarab becomes 5 Divines, then yeah, the Horn Scarab becomes really good. But I don't see anything that jumps out as like, I am a Giga endgame juicing ridiculously rare thing. I think there's a lot of stuff here that's not quite good enough to justify that. Next we have the Horn Scarab of Awakening. Discussed this in the day 16 video. We don't know everything that this can do yet. For instance, a lot of people have been talking about Heist having nothing on the Atlas. In the Scarabs. Maybe Heist has an Ubercraft here that we don't know about. So that's something that will have some information on it. We only know 4 of these crafts, and was it 4? Maybe it was a bit more, but we don't know very many of them. So potentially there'll be more information on this later. Maybe we won't know everything until it's in-game. Horn Scarab of Tradition. All rare monsters in the area have at least 1 reward modifier. So this means they've got one of those Legion-style icons over their head. And player modifiers to item rarity and quantity do not apply in the area. I'm kind of curious if this means that there are some items in the game that have negative rarity, negative quantity as drawbacks. I don't think any of them are good, but it's kind of something to keep in mind, especially if you can put a lot of rare monsters on the map. That said, I think this is mostly a meme. Horn Scarab of Glittering. Players in area gain increased rarity and quantity for each monster slain recently, up to 200 and 100% respectively. Now, this is significant, but also is a pretty short period of time. Recently, yeah, it is the word recently, so it's the last 4 seconds, and it's got some potential. I want to see this in practice. My intuition says that this is better than just adding more monsters in, and maybe it's something to use with some of the crazy Beyond strategies we were talking about to produce a whole lot of extra monsters. So that's something we'll look into. And finally, we've got the Horn Scarab of Pandemonium, which is ridiculous. This is going to provide 15% chance for monsters in the area to be changed into a random Atlas boss. And this is going to be kind of silly. And we've got, yeah, I think this is one that we want to play around with. I just feel like these are going to be rare enough that you're not going to be able to throw them on every map. Anyways, that's all the Scarabs. This is wound up as a 2 3/4 hour stream, which sort of doesn't surprise me. And we didn't even get to the recently asked questions. I feel like I actually kind of need to wind up at this point because I've got some other stuff on over the next couple of days, as well as having to design my own build, make a video around it, and then also cover any news that comes up. So based on that, I'm sort of inclined to wind up the stream at this point. We'll take a final wave of questions, I guess. So get those into chat quickly, and then we'll come up with anything else. Does that last one happen before or after calcification? Do not know. A lot of these Scarabs will live or die based on how they stack with each other. So our calcification doesn't really work with that, unless you're thinking, trying to think which one you're talking about. Rare monsters. Oh no. Are you talking about the Pandemonium Scarab? It's modifies the final map boss in the area, so it's not rare monsters. Calcification is rare monsters. Oh, one thing I do need to do is post a link to my Discord in here as well, which I will then, if people want to join this, feel free. I'll just put a link to it there. I'll have to manually approve you, so it may not be quite instant. And then let's have a quick look at everything else that's come up in chat. So, do I ever play solo self-found? Not really, Calvan. I have tried it a little bit, but I generally don't like it. I like the ability to have weird stuff that happens to me be of use to someone else, ultimately. New Scarab nodes and skittering delirium orbs. I feel like that the blocking nodes should work with skittering delirium orbs, but I'm not confident in that. So here, what we're talking about is things like Scarabs found in your maps cannot be Legion Scarabs. That feels like it should apply to skittering delirium mobs, yeah. I think so. But I'm not sure on that. Anyways, I'm going to wind up there. Obviously, all the usual YouTube rubbish. If you want like a 300% more multiplier to how often you see my videos, then subscribe or like the video. That tends to help. It just means that you will see more of my stuff in the future. But of course, that'll come at the expense of other stuff that might have been there instead. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results, and thanks for tuning in.